Ominous desert wind soundscape, faint whispers of ancient chants, in the shadow of Iraq's sun-scorched dunes. A murder shatters the Hassanieh dig site. Louise Leidner lies dead in a locked room, her secrets buried with a cursed relic. Is it the ghost of her past, a vengeful killer, or a treasure worth killing for? Hercule Poirot unravels a web of betrayal, greed, and hidden gold. But when Nurse Amy Letheran unearths a final clue, the sands whisper a deeper truth. Can they outwit a guardian's wrath and a temple's deadly trap? Dramatic pause. The desert never forgets. Will you dare to listen? Chapter 1. Shadows on the sands. The desert stretched before me like a vast, unreadable manuscript, its dunes inscribed with the wind's fleeting calligraphy. I, Amy Letheran, a nurse of practical disposition and 32 years' experience, stood at the edge of Hassanieh, Iraq, in the autumn of 1935, squinting against the sun's unrelenting glare. My boots crunched on the parched earth, and the air carried a faint tang of dust and ancient secrets. I had been summoned to this remote archaeological dig, not for a patient in the usual sense, but for a woman whose nerves, I was told, were as fragile as the pottery shards scattered around us. Her name was Louise Leidner, wife of Dr. Relic Riddle, the expedition's leader, and already her reputation preceded her, like a shadow cast, long before dusk. The journey from Baghdad had been arduous, a rattling motorcar ride over roads that were little more than suggestions. My driver, a wiry man named Khalil, had chattered incessantly about the dig's peculiarities, tales of cursed relics and sleepless nights among the team. I dismissed his stories as local superstition, but as the camp came into view, a cluster of tents and mud brick huts nestled against a low ridge, I felt a prickle of unease. The landscape seemed to watch, its silence heavier than the heat. Miss Letheran called a voice, crisp and accented, as I stepped from the car. A tall, lean man with sun-bleached hair and spectacles approached, his khaki shirt dusted with red sand. I'm Dr. Relic Leidner. Welcome to Hassanieh. I trust the journey wasn't too taxing. I shook his hand, noting the faint tremor in his grip. Nothing a cup of tea won't fix. Dr. Leidner, I'm here for your wife, I presume. He nodded, his eyes flickering toward a large tent at the camp's center. Louise is delicate. She's been unsettled since we arrived. I'll introduce you shortly. First, let me show you to your quarters. As we walked, the camp revealed itself in glimpses. Workers hauling baskets of earth, their faces wrapped in scarves against the dust. A young man with a sketchpad, scribbling furiously under a canvas awning. A woman with sharp eyes and a clipped stride, barking orders in French. The air buzzed with purpose, but beneath it, I sensed a current of tension, like a tightly wound spring. Your wife's condition, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Is it physical or otherwise? Dr. Leidner hesitated, his gaze drifting to the horizon. She's not ill in the traditional sense. Louise is sensitive, perhaps too much so. She sees things, hears things. Shadows, she says, watching her. I thought a nurse's presence might steady her. I nodded, filing away his words. In my years tending patients, I'd learned that sensitive often meant more than nerves. It meant secrets, fears, or truths too heavy to voice. We reached a small tent, its interior sparse but clean. A cot, a folding table, a basin for washing. My trunk, sent ahead from Baghdad, sat in the corner. Rest, if you need to, Dr. Leidner said. Dinner is at 7. You'll meet the team then. And Louise, left alone, I unpacked my essentials, a spare uniform, a notebook for observations, and a battered copy of Jane Eyre for quiet evenings. The desert's silence pressed against the canvas, broken only by the distant clink of tools and the occasional shout. I changed into a fresh blouse, pinned my nurse's cap, and stepped outside to orient myself. The sun was dipping, painting the dunes in hues of amber and rose. To the east, a low mound marked the excavation site, where figures moved like ants, sifting earth for relics of a civilization long buried. A young man approached, his face boyish despite a layer of dust. Miss Letheran, Bill Coleman, assistant surveyor. Dr. Leidner asked me to fetch you for tea. Mrs. Leidner's expecting you. Lead on. Mr. Coleman, I said, noting his easy grin and the way his eyes darted toward the central tent. He struck me as the sort who charmed his way through life, but there was a sharpness to his gaze, as if he missed little. The tent was larger than the others, its interior furnished with rugs, a low table, and a gramophone perched incongruously on a crate. Louise Leidner sat on a cushioned chair, her golden hair catching the lamplight like a halo. She was beautiful in a way that stopped you cold eyes like twilight, wide and searching, lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach them. Her dress, pale blue and impractical for the desert, clung to her like a second skin. "Miss Letherin," she said, her voice soft but with an edge, like silk over steel. "Eric said you'd come. I'm so glad. This place, it wears on one." I took the offered seat, studying her. Her hands twisted in her lap, and her eyes flicked to the tent's entrance, as if expecting someone or something to appear. "I'm here to help. Mrs. Leidner, tell me what troubles you." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, where to begin? The heat, the dust, the endless digging. But it's more than that. I feel watched. At night, there's a shadow outside my tent, moving just beyond the light. And yesterday, I found this." She reached into a silk pouch and produced a folded paper. I opened it to reveal a single line, scrawled in black ink. "The past will find you." The handwriting was jagged, almost childish, yet it carried a menace that made my skin prickle. "Have you shown this to your husband?" I asked. She shook her head. "Eric would say, it's nonsense. He's consumed by his work. Those old stones mean more to him than I do, sometimes. But you're practical, Miss Letherin. You'll understand." I wasn't so sure about that, but I pocketed the note, promising to keep it safe. "I'll observe, Mrs. Leidner. If there's anything amiss, I'll spot it." Her smile softened, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely relieved. "Call me Louise. I think we'll be friends." Dinner that evening was a study in contrasts. The team gathered in a communal tent, the table laden with flatbreads, spiced lamb, and dates sticky with sweetness. Dr. Leidner presided, his scholarly air at odds with the rugged setting. Beside him sat Richard Carey, a handsome archaeologist with a disarming smile and eyes that lingered too long on Louise. Marie Mercado, a sharp-tongued Frenchwoman, watched him with barely concealed resentment, while her husband, Joseph, a chemist, fidgeted with his fork, his face pale despite the desert sun. David Emmett, the quiet surveyor, ate in silence, his gaze fixed on his plate. And Father Lavigny, a monk with an encyclopedic knowledge of cuneiform, spoke in measured tones about ancient kings. Bill Coleman kept the mood light, regaling us with tales of misadventures in Cairo, but even his laughter felt forced. Louise sat at the table's center, a queen among subjects, her beauty drawing every eye. Yet I noticed how she flinched at sudden sounds, a clatter of cutlery, a gust flapping the tent. When Richard leaned close to murmur something, her fingers tightened on her glass. Marie's lips pursed, and Joseph's fork stilled. Dr. Leidner, oblivious, droned on about a newly unearthed tablet. After dinner, I walked Louise back to her tent. The night was cool, the stars sharp as pinpricks. "Do they all get on like that?" I asked, probing gently. She glanced back at the dining tent. "They're a tangle of egos and secrets. Richard thinks he's irresistible. Marie's jealous of anyone who breathes. And Joseph, he's hiding something, I'm sure of it. Even David, so quiet, watches too closely. And Father Lavigny's piety feels like a mask." I made a mental note of her observations, wondering how much was truth and how much her nerves. At her tent, she paused, her hand on the flap. "Miss Letherin, a promise, you'll stay close." "I don't trust this place." "I'll be here," I said, and she slipped inside, leaving me in the dark. The next morning, I woke to the camp's rhythm. Workers chanting as they hauled earth, the clink of trowels against stone. I joined Dr. Leidner at the dig site, a sprawling grid of trenches where the team sifted for relics. He showed me a clay tablet, its surface etched with wedge-shaped marks. "Cuneiform," he explained, his voice reverent. "A record of a Sumerian priestess. Perhaps we're unearthing a temple, Amy, a place of worship and sacrifice." The word sacrifice lingered, unsettling me. I spent the day observing the team, noting their interactions. Richard and Louise exchanged glances that spoke of familiarity, though she avoided him when possible. Marie snapped at Bill for misplacing a tool, her anger disproportionate. Joseph hovered near the chemical tent, his hands stained with some unidentifiable residue. David sketched the site with meticulous care, but I caught him watching Louise when he thought no one noticed. Father Lavigny, meanwhile, pored over tablets, his fingers tracing the ancient script with a fervor that seemed almost possessive. By afternoon, the heat was oppressive, and I sought shade in my tent. There, I examined the note Louise had given me. The past will find you. It was melodramatic, yet chilling. I tucked it into my notebook, resolving to show it to Dr. Leidner if things escalated. But as I stepped outside, a new discovery sent ripples through the camp. A worker had unearthed a small, obsidian figurine, its eyes carved with unsettling precision. Dr. Leidner declared it a significant find, but Louise, when shown the figurine, paled and retreated to her tent. That evening, as the camp settled, I sat with Bill Coleman under the stars, sipping bitter coffee. Odd place, this, I said, fishing for insights. Mrs. Leidner seems on edge. Bill chuckled, but his eyes were serious. Louise is a magnet for drama, always has been. She's got half the men here wrapped around her finger, and the other half resenting her for it. But that figurine spooked her proper. Said it looked like something from a nightmare. Any idea who might have left her that note? I asked, keeping my tone casual. His grin faded. Note, she didn't mention one. But if someone's playing tricks, I'd wager it's someone who knows her past. She's got history, Amy. Not all of it pretty. I pressed him, but he clammed up, claiming fatigue. As I returned to my tent, I heard a low hum, like a chant carried on the wind. It stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving me to wonder if I'd imagined it. I checked on Louise before retiring. She was asleep, her face peaceful but her hand clutching a silk scarf, as if warding off invisible threats. The next day brought a visitor to the camp, a small, fastidious man with a waxed mustache and eyes like polished onyx. He introduced himself as Hercule Poirot, a detective passing through Iraq on his way to Damascus. Dr. Leidner invited him to stay. Intrigued by his reputation, Poirot's presence was like a spark in dry grass. Everyone watched him, wary yet curious. He joined us for lunch, his questions deceptively simple. To Louise, he asked about her travels. To Richard, her friends in America. To Marie, the camp's daily routine. Each answer seemed to add a piece to a puzzle only he could see. After lunch, I showed Poirot the note, explaining Louise's fears. His eyes gleamed as he studied the handwriting. Mon Dieu, Nurse Letherin, this is no idle prank. The writer knows Madame Leidner's heart and her fears. Tell me, have you noticed anything peculiar? I recounted the hum I'd heard, the figurine's effect on Louise, and the team's strained dynamics. Poirot nodded, stroking his mustache. The desert, it hides much, but it also reveals. I shall observe. Ma chère, keep your eyes open, for the shadows here are not all cast by the sun. That night, as I lay in my tent, the hum returned, louder, more insistent. I crept outside, lantern in hand, but found only empty dunes. Back in my tent, I wrote in my notebook, something is wrong here. Louise is afraid, and I'm starting to feel it too. Poirot sees it, but what? The chapter closed with me resolving to watch the team closely, certain that the note, the figurine, and the hum were threads in a tapestry of danger, waiting to be unraveled. The camp slept, but the desert did not. And I, Amy Letherin, knew that my role here was no longer just that of a nurse. Chapter 2. Whispers of the Past. The sun hung low over the Hassanieh dig site, casting long shadows across the cracked ochre earth. Nurse Amy Letherin adjusted her wide-brimmed hat, shielding her eyes from the relentless Iraqi sun. The air was thick with dust, stirred by the ceaseless work of the excavation team, shovels scraping, brushes whisking, voices murmuring in a rhythm that felt both purposeful and tense. Amy had been at the camp for 3 days, and though her role was to tend to Louise Leidner, the enigmatic wife of Dr. Eric Leidner, she found herself drawn into the camp's undercurrents, as if the desert itself whispered secrets. Louise, with her golden hair and haunted eyes, was a puzzle. She was beautiful, magnetic, yet fragile, as if a single gust of wind might shatter her. Amy had spent the morning with her, noting the way Louise's hands trembled when she spoke of the dig, her gaze darting to the horizon as if expecting a spectre to emerge from the sands. Yesterday's cryptic note, slipped under Louise's door, had set Amy's nerves on edge. Written in a sharp, angular script, it read, "The past does not sleep, it watches." Louise had dismissed it as a prank, but her laughter was hollow, her eyes betraying a fear she wouldn't name. Now, as Amy crossed the camp toward the mess tent, the note weighed on her mind. The team was a mix of personalities, each distinct yet bound by the shared obsession of unearthing history. Dr. Eric Leidner, the expedition leader, was a wiry man with a scholar's intensity, his glasses perpetually slipping down his nose. Richard Carey, the architect, moved with a casual grace that drew eyes, his smile disarming but his glances at Louise too frequent for Amy's liking. Joseph Mercado, the chemist, was a jittery sort, always muttering about soil samples, his fingers stained with chemicals. Then there was Father Lavigny, the epigraphist, whose calm demeanor and priestly robes seemed at odds with the desert's chaos. The others, Bill Coleman, David Emmett, Marie Mercado, Sheila Riley, rounded out the group, each adding their own flavor to the camp's simmering tension. Amy paused near the dig site, where workers sifted through a trench. A young man, David Emmett, was sketching a grid in his notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. He glanced up, catching her eye, and offered a shy nod. Amy returned it, wondering what secrets lay beneath his quiet exterior. She was about to move on when a faint, eerie hum drifted through the air, a low, resonant sound, like a distant chant. It stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving her skin prickling. She scanned the horizon, but the desert offered no answers, only the endless expanse of dunes. Inside the mess tent, the team gathered for lunch, their voices a mix of fatigue and excitement. Amy sat across from Louise, who picked at her food, her eyes distant. Dr. Leidner was recounting the morning's finder, clay tablet etched with cuneiform, unearthed near the ziggurat's base. "It's extraordinary," he said, his voice alight with passion. "The symbols suggest a ritual text, possibly linked to a forgotten cult, or a curse," Louise murmured, her voice barely audible. The table fell silent, forks pausing mid-air. Amy caught Richard Carey's gaze flicker toward Louise, a mix of concern and something darker anger. "Perhaps." "Nonsense, my dear," Dr. Leidner said, patting her hand. "The only curse here is the heat." His laugh was forced, and Amy noted the way his fingers tightened around his glass. Joseph Mercado coughed, breaking the tension. "Tools went missing again this morning," he said, his voice high and nervous. "Third time this week. Someone's sabotaging the dig, or misplacing things." Bill Coleman cut in, his boyish grin masking a sharp edge. "You're always losing your own notes." Joe Mercado flushed, his hands twitching. "I'm not imagining it. And that hum last night, did anyone else hear it?" Amy's pulse quickened. She hadn't mentioned the sound she'd just heard, but Mercathal's words confirmed it wasn't her imagination. Father Lavigny raised an eyebrow, his expression serene. "The desert plays tricks, Mr. Mercado. Wind through the ruins, nothing more." But Amy wasn't convinced. The hum had felt deliberate, almost alive. She glanced at Louise, who was staring at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. Something was wrong here, something deeper than missing tools or desert winds. That afternoon, a visitor arrived, stirring the camp like a stone tossed into still water. Hercule Poirot, the famed Belgian detective, stepped from a dusty car, his polished shoes absurdly out of place amid the sand. His moustache was impeccable, his suit pristine despite the journey, and his grey eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. Dr. Leidner greeted him warmly, explaining that Poirot was passing through Iraq on his way to Baghdad and had accepted an invitation to tour the dig. "A pleasure," Monsieur Poirot said, bowing slightly to Amy as she was introduced. "And you, Mademoiselle Letherin, are the guardian of Madame Leidner's health." "We." Amy nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze, as if he could see through her professional calm to the unease beneath. "I do my best, Mr. Poirot." He smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips. "The best is all one can do." When shadows gather, the team led Poirot to the ziggurat, where the clay tablet lay on a folding table, its surface etched with jagged symbols. Father Lavigny explained the cuneiform, his voice steady as he traced the carvings. "It speaks of a guardian spirit, bound to protect a sacred relic." "Quite poetic, really." Poirot tilted his head, studying the tablet. "Poetic, yes, but perhaps not so innocent. Symbols, they tell stories, father, and stories, they hide truths." Amy watched him closely, noting how his fingers lingered over the tablet's edge, as if sensing something the others missed. She couldn't shake the feeling that Poirot's arrival was no coincidence, that he'd been drawn here by more than scholarly curiosity. As evening fell, Amy joined Louise in her quarters, a small room cluttered with books and artifacts. Louise was pacing, her silk scarf trailing like a ghost. "Amy, you heard it, didn't you? That sound last night." Her voice was low, urgent, Amy hesitated, then nodded. I heard something today, too, like a hum, out by the trenches. Louise's eyes widened, and she sank onto the bed. It's him. I know it is. He's not dead. Who? Amy asked, her heart pounding. Louise's voice dropped to a whisper. Frederick, my first husband. He was a German spy. Amy said he died in a train crash, but I've always felt him watching me, waiting. Amy's mind raced. A dead husband, a cryptic note, a mysterious hum, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet fit together. She pressed Louise for details, but the woman clammed up, her fear palpable. Just stay close, Louise said, gripping Amy's hand. Promise me. I promise, Amy said, though her own nerves were fraying that night. Amy lay awake in her tent, the desert's silence oppressive. The hum returned, faint but unmistakable, rising and falling like a distant prayer. She crept outside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The camp was still, the tents huddled under a starless sky. She moved toward the ziggurat, drawn by the sound, her breath shallow dot the trench. She froze. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the faint glow of a lantern. It was Richard Carey, his hands buried in the soil, digging with a small trowel. He hadn't seen her. Amy stepped back, her foot snapping a twig. Carey's head whipped around, his eyes glinting in the dark. Nurse Letheran, he called, his voice sharp. What are you doing out here? I heard something, she stammered, clutching her flashlight. What about you? He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. Couldn't sleep, thought I'd check the site. Tools keep disappearing, you know. His explanation was plausible, but his tone was too smooth, his smile too practiced. Amy nodded, backing away. Good night, Mr. Carey. Back in her tent, she couldn't shake the image of Carey digging alone, his movements furtive. Was he searching for something or hiding it? The next morning, Amy found Poirot in the mess tent, sipping tea with maddening calm. She recounted the night's events, including Louise's fears about her husband. Poirot listened, his fingers steepled, his eyes never leaving her face. Most interesting, mademoiselle, he said. This Frederick Bosner, he is a ghost who casts a long shadow. And this hum, you describe it, is not the desert's voice, but a human one, perhaps. A signal, a lure. A lure for what? Amy asked. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. For truth, mademoiselle, or for death? He rose, beckoning her to follow. At the ziggurat, he knelt by the clay tablet, his fingers tracing the symbols. Amy watched, her curiosity piqued. What do you see, Mr. Poirot? I see a pattern, he said softly. These symbols, they are not random. They match the handwriting of the note you found under Madame Leidner's door. Amy's breath caught. You mean the note and the tablet are connected? Precisement, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Someone in this camp is weaving a story, mademoiselle. A story of fear, of secrets, of a past that refuses to stay buried. As they returned to the camp, Amy overheard a heated exchange. Near the supply tent, Dr. Leidner's voice was low, furious, directed at Louise. You're imagining things again, my dear. This talk of curses, it's nonsense. It's not nonsense, Louise snapped, her voice breaking. That relic, Eric, it's dangerous. You know it is. Amy froze, her pulse racing. A relic's curse, a dead husband, a cryptic tablet, and now Carey's midnight digging. Each piece tightened the knot of dread in her chest. Poirot's hand grazed her arm, his voice a whisper. Observe, mademoiselle. The truth is here, in the whispers of the past. We must only listen. Chapter 3. The locked room. The sun hung low over the Hassanieh dig, its amber rays stretching long shadows across the sand, as if the desert itself were reaching out to cradle the secrets buried beneath. Nurse Amy Letheran stood at the edge of the camp, her boots dusted with fine grit, her eyes scanning the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of baked earth, and something sharp of fear perhaps, or the metallic tang of dread that had settled over the excavation team since Louise Leidner's unsettling confessions the previous night. Amy's nurse's instincts, honed by years of reading patients' unspoken anxieties, told her the camp was a powder keg, and the cryptic note slipped under Louise's door was the spark. The morning had dawned with a deceptive calm. The team had gathered for breakfast under the canvas awning, their voices low, their laughter forced. Dr. Eric Leidner, the expedition's leader, sat at the head of the table, his scholarly brow furrowed as he sipped his coffee. His wife, Louise, radiant despite her pallor, had spoken little, her eyes darting to the edges of the camp as if expecting the shadowy figure from her visions to materialize. Richard Carey, the handsome architect, had been solicitous, refilling her cup with a smile that seemed to linger too long. Joseph Mercado, the nervous chemist, had spilled his tea, his hands trembling as he muttered apologies. Amy had watched them all, cataloguing their quirks, her mind already piecing together the puzzle of their unease. Now, as the afternoon waned, Amy made her way to Louise's quarters, a small mud-brick room at the heart of the camp. She had promised to check on her patient before dinner, though Louise's complaints of nerves seemed less like illness and more like a premonition. The door was ajar, a sliver of shadow spilling onto the threshold. Amy knocked softly, her voice steady but cautious. "Mrs. Leidner, it's Nurse Leidner." No answer. The silence was heavy, pressing against her chest. She pushed the door open, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The room was tidy, almost austere, with a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a small table holding a water jug and a few books. But the air felt wrong, stifled, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Then Amy saw her. Louise Leidner lay sprawled on the rug, her golden hair fanned out like a halo, her eyes wide and unseeing. A single crimson stain bloomed on the rug beneath her head, stark against the woven patterns. Amy's training kicked in, and she knelt beside the body, her fingers searching for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. The skin was cool, the life gone. She stood, her heart pounding, and scanned the room. The window was barred, the shutters latched from the inside. The door's lock was undisturbed, its key still in place. No footprints marred the floor. No signs of struggle disturbed the sparse furnishings. It was as if death had slipped through the walls like a ghost. Amy stepped back, her breath shallow. She needed to alert the camp, but her nurse's eye caught something of faint irregularity on the rug near Louise's hand. She crouched again, careful not to touch the body, and noticed a tiny corner of paper peeking from beneath the rug's edge. She hesitated, then lifted it gently. It was a fragment of the same cryptic note from the night before, its jagged script reading, "The past will find you." The rest was torn, lost to the desert's secrets. She straightened, tucking the fragment into her pocket, and hurried to the courtyard. The team was scattered, some at the dig site, others in their tents, but Dr. Leidner was near the equipment shed, examining a crate of pottery shards. "Dr. Leidner," Amy called, her voice sharp enough to turn heads. "It's your wife's. She's dead." The words hit like a sandstorm. Dr. Leidner's face drained of color, his clipboard clattering to the ground. "Dead," he whispered, stumbling toward her. "How? Where?" "In her room," Amy said, guiding him back. "We need the others." "And the police." By the time Captain Maitland, the local policeman, arrived from Hassanieh, the entire team had gathered outside Louise's room, their faces a gallery of shock, suspicion, and barely concealed fear. Richard Carey stood closest to the door, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the ground. Joseph Mercado fidgeted, his fingers twisting a handkerchief into knots. Mary Mercado, his sharp-tongued wife, crossed her arms, her gaze darting between the men. Bill Coleman, the young assistant, tried to lighten the mood with a nervous quip, but it fell flat. Father Lavigny, the epigraphist, murmured a prayer, his beads clicking softly. David Emmett, the quiet surveyor, stood apart, his expression unreadable. Sheila Riley, the team's photographer, snapped a picture of the scene before anyone could stop her, earning a glare from Marie. Captain Maitland, a wiry man with a sunburned face and a nonsense demeanor, took charge. "Nobody touches anything," he barked, stepping into the room. He examined the body, the lock, the window, his frown deepening with each detail. "This is murder," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "No one leaves the camp until we sort this out. The killer's one of you." A murmur rippled through the group, eyes meeting and sliding away. Amy felt the weight of their stares, as if her status as an outsider made her a convenient suspect, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying Louise's words from the previous night. "I saw a face at the window. It wasn't human." The memory sent a shiver down her spine, though she dismissed the supernatural. Louise had been terrified, but of what or whom? As Maitland began questioning the team, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the camp, his polished shoes absurdly out of place in the sand. Hercule Poirot, The diminutive detective with a moustache as precise as his mind had been visiting a nearby dig when word of the murder reached him. His presence was like a spark in the dry desert, igniting hope in some, unease in others. Dr. Leidner, still dazed, greeted him with a mixture of relief and desperation. "Monsieur Poirot, thank God you're here. You must help us." Poirot's green eyes glittered as he surveyed the group, his head tilted like a bird sizing up its prey. "Mais oui, I shall assist," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "But first, I must see the scene of this most curious crime." Inside the room, Poirot moved with deliberate grace, his fingers brushing the air as if tracing invisible threads. He examined the body without touching it, noting the single wound, a precise blow to the temple, delivered with force but no mess. "A clean death," he murmured, "but not a simple one." He studied the barred window, its iron rods rusted but intact, and the door's lock, which showed no signs of tampering. "The room, it is locked from within. Yet, a murderer has come and gone." Amy, standing by the door, recounted what she'd found, omitting the note fragment for now. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, as if sensing her omission, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned to the rug, kneeling to inspect the bloodstain. "Curio," he said, his fingers hovering over the spot. "The blood, it is contained. Number splatter, no trail. The killer, he is meticulous." Maitland, impatient, crossed his arms. Meticulous or not, someone in this camp did it. Mrs. Leidner wasn't popular. Too many jealousies, too many secrets. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Jealousies, Captain, do elaborate." Maitland hesitated, then gestured toward Richard Carey, who stood just outside the door, his face pale. Carey was close to her. Too close. "Some say Dr. Leidner didn't like it, did he?" Dr. Leidner flinched, his voice hoarse. "That's nonsense. Louise and I, we were happy. Carey was a friend, nothing more." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Friendship, monsieur, can be a mask for many things. But let us not leap to conclusions. The little grey cells, they must work first." The team was dismissed to their tents, forbidden to leave the camp. Amy lingered, watching Poirot as he paced the room, his eyes darting from the rug to the ceiling. "Nurse Letherin," he said suddenly, "you are observant, Nan. Tell me, what did Madame Leidner say last night?" Amy hesitated, then recounted Louise's fear of the face at the window, her insistence it wasn't human. Poirot listened, his expression unreadable. "A face," he mused, "and yet, the window is barred, the door is locked. How then, does a killer enter?" He moved to the window, running his fingers along the bars. "These are old," he said, "but sturdy. No one could bend them without tools, and there are no marks." He turned to the door, examining the lock again. "The key is inside, undisturbed. And yet, the killer has vanished like a djinn." Amy's mind raced. She thought of the note fragment in her pocket, its jagged script echoing the clay tablet Poirot had studied the day before. She considered showing it to him but held back, unsure why. Perhaps it was the weight of the camp's suspicion, or the fear that the note would point to someone she'd grown to trust. Poirot's voice cut through her thoughts. "Nurse Letherin, you saw Madame Leidner last night. Was she alone?" "Yes," Amy said, then paused. "Well, I heard her speaking to someone as I approached her room. A man's voice, low and urgent. But when I knocked, she said she was alone." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A man's voice. And yet, she denied it. "This is most interesting. Tell me, did you recognize the voice?" Amy shook her head. It was too muffled. "But it wasn't Dr. Leidner. I'd know his tone anywhere." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Very well. We have a locked room, a dead woman, and a voice that should not be. The puzzle, it begins to take shape." As dusk fell, the camp buzzed with tension. Amy returned to her tent, the note fragment burning in her pocket. She sat on her cot, unfolding it under the dim light of her lantern. The words, "The past will find you," stared back at her, their meaning elusive yet ominous. She thought of Louise's fear, of the shadowy figure, of the voice she'd heard. The camp felt like a maze, each path leading to a new question. Outside, Poirot stood alone in the courtyard, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. He was staring at the dig site, where the team had unearthed a cluster of clay tablets the day before. Amy joined him, drawn by his stillness. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "do you think the killer is still here?" He turned, his eyes catching the last glint of sunlight. "Oh yes, Nurse Letherin, the killer is here, hiding in plain sight. But the method this locked met is a masterpiece of deception. The little grey cells, they tell me the answer lies not in what we see, but in what we do not see. He paused, then added softly, tomorrow, we shall look closer. The dessert, it keeps its secrets well, but not from Hercule Poirot. Amy nodded, her resolve hardening. The camp was a web of lies, and Louise's death was only the beginning. As she returned to her tent, the wind carried a faint hum, like the echo of a forgotten curse. She shivered, knowing the truth was close, but so was the danger. The night stretched on, the camp silent save for the whisper of sand against canvas. Amy lay awake, her mind racing with questions. Who had been in Louise's room? How had the killer entered a locked space? And what did the note mean? The answers, she sensed, were buried not in the desert, but in the hearts of those around her. Poirot too was awake, his tent lit by a single candle. He sat at a small table, a clay tablet before him, its carvings illuminated by the flickering light. The symbols matched the note's script, a connection he could not ignore. "The past will find you," he murmured, tracing the words. But whose past, and whose vengeance? Chapter 4. Dust and Deceptions. The sun hung low over the Hassanieh dig, its dying rays casting long jagged shadows across the dunes. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth and the faint tang of sweat as the excavation team trudged through their tasks with a weariness that went beyond the day's labor. Nurse Amy Leidner, her starched uniform clinging to her skin, felt the weight of the desert's oppressive heat and something else, a creeping unease that had settled in her bones since Louise Leidner's death. The camp, once alive with the clatter of tools and the hum of scholarly debate, now buzzed with suspicion. Each glance between team members laced with unspoken accusations. Amy stood at the edge of the dig site, her notebook tucked under her arm, watching the team as they sifted through the sandy soil. The murder of Louise, found lifeless in her locked bedroom with only a single bloodstain as evidence, had shattered the camp's fragile harmony. Captain Maitland's gruff declaration that the killer was one of their own hung over them like a storm cloud. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive detective with his immaculate moustache and piercing grey eyes, had taken charge of the investigation, his presence both a comfort and a provocation. His questions, sharp as a scalpel, had already begun to peel back the team's carefully guarded facades. Amy's gaze drifted to Richard Carey, the archaeologist whose charm had once seemed effortless but now felt calculated. He knelt by a trench, brushing dirt from a shard of pottery, his jaw tight. Nearby, Marie Mercado, her dark eyes flashing with barely concealed hostility, sorted artifacts with a ferocity that suggested she was grinding her own resentments into the dust. Joseph Mercado, her husband, hovered at the periphery, his nervous fidgeting a stark contrast to his usual scholarly composure. Bill Coleman, the young assistant with a boyish grin and a knack for trouble, lounged against a crate, tossing pebbles into the sand with a nonchalance that grated on Amy's nerves. Miss Leather and Poirot's voice cut through her thoughts, smooth and precise as always. He stood beside her, his black patterned shoes incongruously pristine amidst the grit. "You observe, yes, but do you see? The human heart, it reveals itself in the smallest gestures." Amy turned to him, her brow furrowing. "I see a lot of people who don't trust each other anymore, and I can't say I blame them. Louise's death, it's like it tore the mask off this place." Poirot's eyes gleamed, Prescientian, and when the mask falls, we glimpse the truth. But truths, they are like the artifacts buried, here fragile, hidden, and often dangerous. Before Amy could respond, a shout rang out from the dig site. David Emmett, the quiet, dependable worker, emerged from a shallow trench, holding aloft a small, cracked clay vessel. The team gathered around, their murmurs rising like a swarm of bees. Amy and Poirot joined them, the detective's gaze fixed on the artifact with an intensity that made Amy's skin prickle. "It's a storage jar," Dr. Relic Leidner announced, his voice steady despite the strain etched into his face. Louise's husband had aged a decade in a day, his scholarly demeanor fraying at the edges. Early dynastic, perhaps. But look here, he pointed to a faint inscription on the jar's rim, a series of angular cuneiform marks. "This isn't typical for utilitarian pottery. It's ceremonial." Father Lavigny, the team's epigraphist, pushed forward, his monkish robes incongruous in the desert heat. "Let me see," he said, his tone clipped. He traced the symbols with a trembling finger, his face pulling. This speaks of a guardian, a protector of sacred relics. It warns of betrayal. A ripple of unease passed through the group. Marie MacArthur's lips curled into a sneer. More of your fairy tales, father. Louise was killed by a person, not some ancient curse. Yet symbols have power, Madame Mercado, Poirot interjected, his voice calm but commanding. They carry the weight of belief, and belief, it can drive a man or a woman to murder. The team fell silent, their eyes darting to one another. Amy clutched her notebook tighter, her mind racing. She had seen Louise's fear, heard her whispered confessions about a shadowy figure and cryptic notes. Now, with this jar and its ominous inscription, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to multiply rather than align. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Poirot beckoned Amy to follow him to Louise's tent, now cordoned off as a crime scene. The interior was stifling, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine, perfume, and death. Poirot moved with deliberate grace, his eyes scanning every detail: the neatly made bed, the small table cluttered with books and papers, the jewelry box gleaming in the corner. He paused at the box, its lacquered surface catching the dim light. Miss Leidner, he said, you mentioned Madame Leidner's habits. Did she often handle her jewelry herself? Amy nodded. She was particular about it, always rearranging her necklaces, checking the clasps. She said it calmed her. Poirot opened the box, revealing a tangle of gold chains and gemstone rings. His fingers, nimble and precise, probed the velvet lining. With a soft click, a hidden compartment sprang open, revealing a folded piece of paper. Amy's breath caught as Poirot unfolded it, revealing a sketch of an intricate relic, a circular amulet adorned with cuneiform and a central stone that seemed to pulse with life, even in the crude pencil lines. This, Poirot said, holding the sketch to the light, is no mere trinket. It is a key, perhaps, to the heart of this mystery. Amy leaned closer, her heart pounding. Louise never mentioned this, but it's like the symbols on that jar. Do you think she knew something about it? Poirot's mustache twitched. She knew, or she feared, and that fear, it drew the killer's hand. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Amy and Poirot hurried to the edge of the camp, where a crowd had gathered around Bill Coleman. He held a crumpled piece of paper, his face pale. Found it in the tool shed, he stammered, handing it to Captain Maitland. It's like the one Louise got. Poirot took the note, his eyes narrowing as he read the scrawled words. The Guardian watches. The traitor falls. The handwriting was identical to the note slipped under Louise's door, its angular strokes mirroring the cuneiform on the jar and the sketch. Maitland cursed under his breath. This is getting out of hand. 2 notes, a murder, and now this. Relic nonsense, Poirot. What's your take? Poirot folded the note with care. This is not nonsense, Captain. It is a thread in a tapestry of deception. The killer wishes us to believe in curses and relics, but I, Hercule Poirot, see the human hand behind it. And that hand, it is close. The day wore on, the heat giving way to a restless dusk. Amy couldn't shake the image of the sketch, its lines haunting her like a half-remembered dream. She wandered to the edge of the camp, where Sheila Riley, the local official's daughter, sat sketching the dunes. Sheila's pencil moved with a fierce energy, her eyes distant. Miss Riley, Amy ventured, you've been around the dig a lot. Did Louise ever talk about a relic, something unusual? Sheila's hand stilled. She was obsessed with the idea of a curse, kept saying the past wasn't done with her. I thought it was just her being dramatic, but now, she trailed off, her gaze flickering to the horizon. Amy pressed further. Did you ever see her with a sketch of an amulet? Maybe. Sheila hesitated, then nodded. Once she showed me a drawing, said it was something Eric found years ago. She didn't want him to know she'd kept it, said it was dangerous. Amy's pulse quickened. Dangerous how? Before Sheila could answer, a low rumble shook the ground, followed by a howl that seemed to rise from the desert itself. The camp froze, tools clattering to the ground. Amy's eyes locked with Sheila, both women caught in the grip of sudden fear. It's just a sandstorm, Dr. Leidner called, his voice strained as he emerged from his tent. Everyone, secure the equipment and get inside. But Amy wasn't so sure. The sound was too deliberate, too alive. She glanced at Poirot, who stood motionless, his head tilted, as if listening to a melody only he could hear. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, That wasn't the wind, Nan, he replied, his voice low. It was a warning. The storm hit with a vengeance, sand whipping through the camp like a living thing. Tents rattled, and the air grew thick with dust, forcing the team to huddle in the main tent. Amy sat near Poirot, her notebook open but untouched, her mind racing with questions. The sketch, the note, the jar's inscription all pointed to a relic that seemed to pulse at the heart of the murder. But why? And who among them would kill? To possess it or to bury its secrets? As the wind howled outside, Poirot leaned toward Amy, his voice barely audible over the storm. Miss Letherin, consider this. The killer does not seek the relic for its value, but for what it reveals. A secret, perhaps, that Madame Leidner carried to her grave. Amy swallowed hard. You think the relic's tied to her past, to her first husband? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. The past, it is a shadow that never fades, and in this camp, every shadow hides a truth. The storm raged on, trapping the team in a cocoon of tension. Marie McCathor's sharp tongue lashed out at Bill Coleman, accusing him of hiding the note to stir trouble. Joseph Mercado fidgeted, his eyes darting to the tent's flapping entrance. Richard Carey remained silent, his face a mask of controlled grief. Father Lavigny muttered prayers, his fingers tracing invisible symbols in the air. David Emmett, ever the quiet observer, watched them all with an intensity that made Amy's skin crawl. As the night deepened, Amy found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of the tent, braving the dying storm to clear her head. The camp was a maze of shadows, the dunes sculpted into eerie shapes by the wind. She paused by Louise's tent, its cordon swaying in the breeze. A faint rustle caught her ear, and she turned to see a figure darting between the tents, a silhouette, just as Louise had described. "Who's there?" Amy called, her voice trembling. No answer came, only the whisper of sand settling in the storm's wake. She hurried back to the main tent, her heart pounding. Poirot was still awake, his eyes meeting hers as she entered. "Miss Letherin," he said, "you have seen something." She nodded, breathless, a shadow, moving fast, like Louise said. Poirot's expression hardened. "Then we are close. The killer grows careless, and in their haste, they will reveal themselves." Chapter 5. The Relic's Riddle. The sun hung low over the Hassanieh dig, its amber rays slicing through the haze of dust that clung to the air like a restless spirit. Nurse Amy Letherin adjusted her scarf, shielding her face from the gritty wind that swept across the Iraqi desert. The camp, a cluster of canvas tents and makeshift shelters, buzzed with a nervous energy that had only grown since Louise Leidner's murder 2 days prior. The locked room, the single bloodstain on the rug, and the barred window, each detail gnawed at Amy's mind, as did the cryptic sketch of an ancient relic found in Louise's jewelry box. Now, as the team gathered under the canvas awning for supper, the weight of suspicion pressed heavier than the heat. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit dusted with sand, yet somehow pristine, sat apart, his sharp eyes scanning the group. Amy watched him, noting the way his fingers tapped rhythmically on the table, as if decoding an invisible cipher. The team: Dr. Eric Leidner, Richard Carey, Father Lavigny, Marie and Joseph Mercado, Bill Coleman, Sheila Riley, David Emmett, and the young assistant Carl Reiterate, in near silence, their forks scraping against tin plates. The absence of Louise, once the camp's radiant center, left a void that no one dared acknowledge aloud. Amy's thoughts drifted to the relic's sketch, a jagged, circular object adorned with spiraling symbols, like a sunburst trapped in stone. Poirot had studied it for hours, murmuring about a Mesopotamian curse tied to a legendary artifact said to bring ruin to its possessors. The idea seemed fanciful, yet the camp's unease lent it credence. Tools vanished from the dig site, a faint hum echoed in the night, and now Amy had caught David Emmett sketching similar symbols in his notebook, an act he'd brushed off as idle doodling. "Miss Letherin," Poirot's voice cut through her reverie, low and precise. "You are observing, are you not? The little grey cells, they work." Amy flushed, caught off guard. "I'm just thinking about the sketch, Monsieur Poirot. It's unsettling, those symbols, and now David's drawing them to Pirta." Mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "The symbols, they speak, do they not? But to whom, and of what?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Keep your eyes open, mademoiselle. The desert hides many truths, but it also reveals them to those who look." Before Amy could respond, A shout shattered the evening stillness. Carl Reiter stumbled into the circle of lamplight, his face pale as bone. "It's Hassan," he gasped, pointing toward the dig site. "He's dead." The team surged to their feet, chairs toppling. Dr. Leidner, his scholarly calm fracturing, led the charge toward the excavation trenches, a quarter-mile from camp. Amy followed, her nurse's instincts overriding her fear. Poirot, surprisingly spry, kept pace, his cane tapping the ground like a metronome. In the trench, beneath a jagged outcrop of sandstone, lay Hassan, one of the local workers. His body was slumped against a crate of pottery shards, his eyes wide and unseeing. A faint, green tint stained his lips, and a clay cup lay shattered beside him, its contents seeping into the sand. The air carried a bitter herbal scent that made Amy's nose wrinkle. "Poison," Poirot declared, kneeling beside the body. He dipped a gloved finger near the cup's residue, sniffing cautiously. "A rare herb, perhaps Datura stramonium, deadly, and not native to this precise region. Someone brought it here." Captain Maitland, summoned from Hassanieh, arrived with 2 officers, his face grim. "Another murder," he muttered, eyeing the team. "This is no coincidence. First Mrs. Leidner, now Hassan. Someone's targeting this dig." Poirot rose, brushing sand from his knees. "Not the dig capitaine, the relic, or, perhaps, what it represents." He turned to the team, his gaze piercing. "Who among you was with Hassan this afternoon?" Silence fell, broken only by the wind's low moan. David Emmett stepped forward, his jaw tight. "I was with him, cataloguing finds. But I left him an hour ago to fetch water." "He was fine then?" "Fine, you say?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, here he lies, poisoned by a substance not easily obtained. Curious." David's cheeks reddened, but he held Poirot's gaze. "I didn't do this, I swear it." Amy's mind raced. David's notebook, the symbols, his proximity to Hassanieh, all pointed to him. Yet his quiet demeanor, his steady hands at the dig, seemed at odds with the killer's cunning. She glanced at Father Lavigny, who stood apart, his clerical collar stark against the desert backdrop. He'd been oddly silent since the relic sketch surfaced, claiming ignorance of its origins despite his expertise in epigraphy. His fingers twitched, as if resisting the urge to write. Poirot addressed the group. "Mise Armis, the relic's riddle deepens. The sketch, the symbols, the poisonal, are threads in a tapestry of motive. Tonight, I propose a trap. We shall announce a new find, a relic matching the sketch, to be unveiled tomorrow. The killer, they will act, and we shall be ready." Dr. Leidner's voice trembled. "A trap. Hercule, this is madness. We're already on edge." Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "Fear loosens tongues and reveals truths. Trust in Poirot's little grey cells." As the team dispersed, Amy lingered, watching Poirot sketch in the sand with his canna spiral, like the relic's symbols. "Monsieur Poirot," she ventured, "do you really think the relic's cursed?" He chuckled softly. "A curse, mademoiselle, is but a story men tell to explain their fears. The true curse is greed, or perhaps vengeance. We shall see." The next morning, the camp buzzed with Poirot's fabricated announcement. A relic matching Louise's sketch had been found in Trench 7, to be displayed at noon. Amy watched the team closely, her nurse's training sharpening her eye for tells. Marie Macatho's lips pursed as she polished tools, her movements sharp and resentful. Joseph, her husband, fumbled with a trowel, his hands shaking more than usual. Sheila Riley, the team's photographer, snapped pictures with a distracted air, her eyes darting to Richard Carey, who lounged with a forced nonchalance. At mid-morning, Amy slipped away to the storage tent, where finds were catalogued. She wanted to check David's notebook again, hoping its symbols might clarify the relic's mystery. The tent was dim, its air thick with dust. She found the notebook on a crate, its pages filled with meticulous sketches of pottery and tools, and there, near the back, a series of spirals, identical to the relic's design. Her heart quickened. Was David copying the relic, or creating it? A shadow moved behind her. Amy spun, clutching the notebook. Father Lavigny stood in the entrance, his face unreadable. "Miss Letherin, you are curious?" "Yes." His voice was soft, almost too smooth. I was just checking something," Amy stammered, stepping back. "David's sketches there like the relic's symbols." Lavigny's eyes flickered. "Symbols are dangerous things. They carry meanings beyond what we see." He stepped closer, his hand brushing a crate. "You should be careful, poking into such matters." Amy's pulse raced, but she held her ground. "Are you saying the relic's real, that it's tied to the murders?" He smiled thinly. "I say only that knowledge can be a burden. Leave the detecting to Monsieur Poirot." Before Amy could press further, a cry rang out from the dig site. She bolted from the tent, Lavigny following. In Trench 7, Bill Coleman knelt beside a collapsed worker, Ali, who clutched his throat, gasping. A water flask lay spilled beside him, its contents reeking of the same bitter herb as Hassan's cup. Poirot arrived, his face a mask of focus. "Do not touch him," he barked, kneeling to inspect Ali. "He lives, but barely. Mademoiselle Letheran, your skills, vite." Amy sprang into action, checking Ali's pulse, weak but steady. "He's poisoned, like Hassan," she said, her voice calm despite her fear. "We need to induce vomiting and get him to shade." As Amy worked, Poirot examined the flask. "The same herb, administered today. The trap, it seems, has sprung." Early, he turned to the gathered team, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Who filled this flask?" Silence. Then Carl Reiter spoke, his voice unsteady. "I filled it this morning, from the main tank, but I didn't put anything in it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, poison found its way. Someone here is very clever and very desperate." Ollie was carried to the medical tent, where Amy stabilized him with charcoal and water, her hands steady despite the chaos. Poirot paced outside, muttering to himself. When Amy emerged, he beckoned her aside. "Mademoiselle, you saw something in the storage tent." She hesitated, then showed him David's notebook. "These symbols, they matched the relics. Sketch, and Father Lavigny, he was acting strange, warning me off." Poirot studied the pages, his lips pursed. "David Emmett, he is quiet, but observant. And Lavigny, his knowledge of ancient texts is vast, yet he claims ignorance of the relic. One of them lies, or perhaps both." As noon approached, the camp gathered at Trench 7 for the supposed relic unveiling. Poirot had arranged a crate, draped in cloth, to stand in for the artifact. The team stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Amy watched David, whose hands were stuffed in his pockets, and Lavigny, whose eyes darted to the crate. Poirot stepped forward, his voice theatrical. "Mesdames et messieurs, behold the relic of legend, said to curse those who claim it." He whipped off the cloth, revealing nothing. The crate was empty. Gasps rippled through the group. Marie MacArthur's face twisted in anger. "Is this a joke, Poirot?" "No joke, Madame," Poirot said, his tone sharp. "The relic is a fiction, but the killer's fear is real. Someone poisoned Ollie to stop this moment, believing the relic would expose them." Joseph MacArthur stepped forward, his voice shrill. "This is madness. You're accusing us all." Poirot's eyes locked on him. "Not all, Monsieur MacArthur, but one among you knows the relic's true significance, not as a curse, but as a key to a secret worth killing for." Amy's mind raced. The relic's sketch, David's notebook, Lavigny's unease, the poison all pointed to a hidden truth. She recalled Louise's jewelry box, the sketch tucked in a secret compartment. Had Louise known something about the relic, something that led to her death? Before Poirot could continue, Sheila Riley screamed. A snake, its scales glinting like bronze, slithered from the crate, coiling in the sand. The team scattered, shouting. Poirot, unfazed, pinned the snake with his cane, revealing it as a harmless desert racer. "A distraction," he said, his voice cold, "planted to disrupt us. The killer grows bold." As the team calmed, Poirot turned to David. "Monsieur Emmett, your sketches, why do they mirror the relic?" David stiffened. I was studying the artifacts. The symbols fascinated me. I didn't mean anything by it." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lavigny. "And you, mon père, your knowledge of cuneiform is unmatched, yet you claim no connection to the relic's symbols." Lavigny's face tightened. "I told you, I don't know them. They're not in any text I've studied." "Lies," Poirot said softly. "The symbols are Akkadian, from a rare dialect. You, a scholar, would recognize them. Why do you hide this?" Lavigny's composure cracked. I feared the relic's curse. It's real, Poirot. I've seen what it does." The team murmured, but Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. Tonight, we dig deeper, not in the sand, but in the truth. The killer will act again, and Poirot will be waiting." That night, Amy couldn't sleep. The camp was quiet, save for the wind's mournful howl. She sat in her tent, poring over Louise's sketch by lamplight. The spirals seemed to pulse, as if alive. A faint noise, footsteps, made her freeze. She doused the lamp and peered through the tent flap. A figure moved toward the dig site, carrying a lantern. Amy's heart pounded, but she followed, keeping low. The figure was Father Livigny, his robes swaying as he entered Trench 7. Amy crept closer, hiding behind a crate. Livigny knelt, digging with a small trowel, his movements frantic. Before Amy could act, a second figure emerged, David Emmett, his face grim. "Livigny," he hissed, "what are you doing?" Livigny froze, clutching a small clay tablet. "Stay back, David. This doesn't concern you." "It does," David said, stepping closer. "I know about the relic. Louise told me." "It's not cursed, it's a map." Amy's breath caught. A map. To what? Before Livigny could respond, a gunshot cracked through the night. Livigny collapsed, the tablet falling from his hands. David dove for cover as Amy stifled a scream. Footsteps retreated into the darkness. Amy ran to Livigny, checking his pulse. He was alive, the bullet grazing his shoulder. "David," she called. "Help me." David emerged, his face pale. "Who shot him?" "I don't know," Amy said, binding Livigny's wound with her scarf. "But we need Poirot." Minutes later, Poirot arrived, his face a storm of focus. He examined the tablet Livigny had unearthed, a small, cracked slab, etched with the same spirals as the sketch. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "this is no relic. It is, as Monsieur Emmett said, a map. To a treasure, perhaps, or a secret Louise died to protect." Livigny groaned, stirring. "It's dangerous," he whispered. "The tablet, it points to a chamber Louise knew. She was going to expose it." Poirot's eyes blazed, and someone wished to silence her. "And now you." "The trap, it has worked. The killer is among us, and they will strike again." As the camp awoke to the chaos, Amy's mind spun. The relic, the murders, the tablet, all were pieces of a puzzle only Poirot could solve. But with Livigny wounded and the killer still at large, the desert's secrets felt more treacherous than ever. Chapter 6. Masks of Motive. Sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Hassanieh dig site in hues of amber and violet, as if the desert itself were conspiring to cloak its secrets in twilight's embrace. The air was heavy, not just with the day's residual heat, but with a palpable tension that clung to the excavation camp like dust on a relic. Nurse Amy Letheran, her auburn hair tucked beneath a practical scarf, sat on a canvas stool outside her tent, her journal open on her lap. The scratches of her pen were deliberate, each word a tether to her unraveling sense of order. The murder of Louise Leidner, the cryptic notes, and the eerie hum that haunted the nights had woven a tapestry of dread she could no longer dismiss as mere nerves. In the distance, the silhouette of Hercule Poirot moved with measured grace, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. He was a small man, yet his presence commanded the camp like a conductor over an orchestra of discord. Since his arrival, he had been a quiet storm, observing, questioning, and peeling back the layers of the team's carefully guarded facades. Amy's eyes followed him as he paused near the central excavation pit, where the team had unearthed a scattering of pottery shards that morning. His gloved fingers traced the air above a clay fragment, as if coaxing secrets from its ancient grooves. Amy's pen paused as a shadow fell across her page. Sheila Riley, the young sharp-tongued daughter of a local official, stood before her, arms crossed, her eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and unease. "Writing your memoirs already, Nurse Letheran? Or are you spying for that little detective?" Sheila's voice carried a barb, but her posture betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. "I'm keeping notes," Amy replied evenly, closing her journal. "It helps me think, and I'm not spying for anyone. If you've something to say, Miss Riley, I'm listening." Sheila's lips twitched, as if debating whether to bite or retreat. "Louise was trouble," she said at last, her voice low. "You saw how she twisted the men around her, Richard, Joseph, even my David. She had a way of making people want to please her, then tossing them aside like broken pots. If you ask me, half this camp had reason to want her gone." Amy's pulse quickened, but she kept her tone calm. "That's a bold claim. Care to be specific?" Sheila hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard her arguing with Father Livigny the night before she died. Something about a tablita, real one, not one of his fakes. She knew something about him, Nurse, something he didn't want out." Before Amy could press further, A sharp cry cut through the dusk. It came from the direction of the dig, where lanterns bobbed like fireflies. Amy and Sheila exchanged a glance and hurried toward the sound. Their footsteps, kicking up clouds of sand, they found Bill Coleman, the team's affable but slippery assistant. Clutching his hand, blood seeping through his fingers, Dr. Louise Leidner, his face pale under his sun-weathered hat, was already at Bill's side, barking orders for a first-aid kit. "What happened?" Amy asked, slipping into her nurse's mode as she knelt beside Bill. "Caught my hand on a blasted shard," Bill muttered through gritted teeth. "Sharp as a knife, that one. Didn't see it in the dark." Amy examined the wound, a deep gash across his palm, but clean. She cleaned and bandaged it. Her eyes flicked to the shard in question, lying innocently among the others. Its edge gleamed under the lantern light, unnaturally honed. She glanced at Poirot, who had appeared silently at the edge of the circle, his mustache twitching as he studied the scene. "An unfortunate accident, Monsieur Coleman," Poirot said, his voice deceptively mild, "but perhaps not entirely accidental. This shard, it is not like the others. It has been sharpened, deliberately, I think." A murmur rippled through the gathered team. Richard Carey, his handsome face taut. Marie Mercado, her eyes darting nervously. Joseph Mercado, wringing his hands. And Father Lavigny, whose calm demeanor seemed a touch too practiced. Amy's mind raced to Sheila's words about Lavigny and Louise. Could the shard be a warning, or something more sinister? Poirot's trap, set earlier that day, had borne fruit sooner than expected. He had orchestrated a subtle ruse, letting slip to the team that he was close to identifying the killer, based on a unique artifact found in Louise's room. The bait had been vague enough to provoke reaction, but specific enough to unsettle the guilty. The sharpened shard, Amy realized, was no accident. It was a response, a desperate act to silence or intimidate. As the team dispersed, Poirot beckoned Amy to follow him to the edge of the camp, where the desert stretched into darkness. "Mademoiselle Letherin," he said, his voice low, "you have the eyes of a nurse, trained to see what others miss. Tell me, what did you observe when Monsieur Coleman was injured?" Amy recounted the scene, Bill's genuine surprise, the shard's unnatural edge, and the fleeting look of fear in Father Lavigny's eyes. Poirot nodded, his gaze distant. "The good father, he is not what he seems. This morning, I sent a telegram to my contacts in Baghdad. The real Father Lavigny is in Paris, studying manuscripts. Our epigraphist is an impostor." Amy's breath caught. "An impostor? But why? And what does this have to do with Louise's murder?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That we shall uncover. But first, we must confront this impostor before he strikes again." The confrontation took place in the mess tent, where Poirot had gathered the team under the guise of discussing the next day's dig schedule. The air was thick with suspicion, the lanterns casting long shadows that danced like specters on the canvas walls. Father Lavigny, the man posing as him, stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped, his face a mask of serene confidence. "Monsieur," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tension, "you have been most helpful in deciphering our tablets. But I wonder, how does a man of the cloth come to know so much about the black market for antiquities?" The impostor's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "I study ancient texts, Monsieur Poirot. My knowledge is academic, nothing more." "Academic, perhaps," Poirot said, pacing slowly. "But the real Father Lavigny, he is in Paris. Now you, Monsieur Raoul Meneur, are a thief, known for forging relics and selling them to unsuspecting collectors. Louise Leidner, she discovered your secret, did she not?" A gasp rippled through the tent. Meneur's eyes widened, and for a moment Amy thought he might bolt, but Poirot's gaze pinned him in place. "I deny nothing," Meneur said at last, his voice steady but cold. "Yes, I am Raoul Meneur. I came here to acquire certain items, but murder, no, Monsieur Poirot. I am no killer." "Then explain this," Poirot said, producing a folded letter from his pocket. Amy recognized it instantly. She had found it tucked in Louise's room, hidden behind a mirror. The letter, written in Louise's elegant script, accused the epigraphist of deceit and threatened to expose him unless he left the dig. Meneur's composure cracked. "She was blackmailing me," he admitted. "She knew I was forging relics, using the dig to smuggle them. But I swear, I did not kill her. I needed her alive. She was my leverage with the buyers." The team erupted in whispers, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. "If not you, Monsieur Meneur, then who?" Someone in this camp used your deception as a mask for their own motives, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover them." As the meeting dissolved, Amy lingered, her mind racing. Meniere's confession was a bombshell, but it didn't explain the second note, the relic's sketch, or the eerie hum that still echoed in her dreams. She sought out Sheila Riley, hoping to pry more from her earlier hint. They met by the water barrels, where the desert's chill was creeping in. "Tell me about Louise and the men," Amy said, keeping her voice low. "You said she manipulated them. How?" Sheila's eyes narrowed, but she spoke freely. "Louise had a way of making men feel they were her world, then cutting them off cold. Richard Carey was smitten, followed her like a puppy. Joseph Mercado, he'd blush just hearing her voice. Even David Emmett, my David, wasn't immune. She'd flirt, drop hints about her past, make them think they were special, but it was all a game to her. She loved the power." "And you?" Amy asked. "Did you hate her for it?" Sheila laughed, a brittle sound. "Hate her, maybe, but I didn't kill her. I'm not that kind of fool. If you want motive, look at Marie Mercado. She despised Louise, thought she was stealing her husband's attention, or Richard, his pride was wounded when Louise turned cold." Amy filed away Sheila's words, her nurse's instincts tingling. The camp was a powder keg of jealousy, greed, and hidden pasts. As she returned to her tent, she noticed a flicker of movement near the excavation pit. David Emmett stood there, alone, sketching in his notebook by lantern light. His quiet demeanor had always struck her as steady, but now she recalled the symbols in his sketches eerily, similar to those on the clay tablet Poirot had found. She approached cautiously. "David, it's late. What are you working on?" He started, closing the notebook quickly. "Just notes on the dig, trying to make sense of the patterns." Amy's eyes lingered on the notebook, patterns like the ones on Louise's tablet. David's face tightened, but he nodded. "I noticed them, too. They're old, Amy, older than anything we've found here. I think Louise knew what they meant, but she never told anyone." Before Amy could press further, a low hum vibrated through the air, faint but unmistakable. It was the same eerie sound that had plagued the camp, like a distant chant from the desert's depths. David's eyes widened, and he grabbed her arm. "Did you hear that?" Amy nodded, her heart pounding. "It's been happening every night. Do you know what it is?" David hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but it's not natural. It's coming from the dig site, near the deepest trench." They moved toward the trench, the hum growing louder, a mournful cadence that seemed to pulse with the desert's heartbeat. At the trench's edge, Amy spotted a glint of metal, a small, ornate dagger, half buried in the sand. She reached for it, but David stopped her. "Don't touch it. It's not one of ours." Poirot appeared as if summoned by the night itself, his eyes gleaming in the lantern light. "Mademoiselle Letherin, Monsieur Emmett, what have we here?" He knelt, examining the dagger without touching it. Its blade was etched with symbols matching those on the tablet and Louise's note. "This," Poirot said, "is no ordinary relic. It is a key, perhaps, to the motive we seek." "Monsieur Emmett, you have been sketching these symbols. Why?" David's jaw tightened. I was curious. Louise showed me the tablet once, said it was special. I thought it might be worth something, but I didn't kill her, Poirot, I swear it." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "Curiosity, it can be dangerous, Nan, but I believe you. For now, Mademoiselle Letherin, keep this dagger safe. It is evidence, and it may yet speak." As they returned to the camp, Amy's mind churned. Meniere's deception, Louise's the symbols, the hum, the dagger, was a puzzle with too many pieces. She glanced at Poirot, who seemed lost in thought, his fingers tapping a rhythm only he understood. In her tent, Amy tucked the dagger into her medical bag, its weight a reminder of the danger lurking among them. She opened her journal, her pen, moving swiftly as she recorded the night's events, but her thoughts kept drifting to Poirot's words. The murders were personal, not driven by the relics. If Meniere wasn't the killer, then who in this camp harbored a hatred deep enough to kill? And what did the dagger's symbols mean? The hum returned, softer now, like a whisper from the desert's ancient heart. Amy shivered, pulling her blanket tighter. Tomorrow, she knew, Poirot would tighten his net, and someone's mask would slip. Completely, the chapter closed with her staring at the tent's canvas ceiling, the hum fading into silence, leaving her and the listeners haunted by the question of who would be unmasked next. Chapter 7. Echoes in the dark. The Mesopotamian night pressed against the canvas of Amy Leatherin's tent, heavy with the weight of secrets. The air was thick, not just with the desert's relentless heat, but with an intangible dread that clung to the Hassanieh dig site like dust on ancient stone. The camp, a fragile cluster of tents and makeshift shelters, seemed to huddle closer under the starless sky, as if bracing for a storm no one could see. Amy sat on her cot, her journal open, but untouched, the nib of her pen hovering above a blank page. The events of the past days, Louise Leidner's murder, the poisoned worker, the unmasking of Father Lavigny as the thief Raoul Menia had left her nerves frayed, her mind a whirl of suspicion and half-formed fears. Outside, the wind carried a low moan, not unlike the eerie hum the team had reported hearing in the nights before Louise's death. Amy shivered, though the night was warm. She had dismissed the sound as a trick of the desert at first, but now it seemed to pulse with intent, as if the sands themselves whispered warnings. The excavation team was on edge, their camaraderie fractured by Poirot's relentless probing. Each member, Dr. Eric Leidner, Richard Carey, Joseph Mercado, Mary Mercado, David Emmett, Bill Coleman, Sheila Riley, carried a shadow of guilt, their glances sharp with unspoken accusations. And Poirot, with his meticulous grey cells, was circling closer to the truth, his presence both a comfort and a goad. Amy's thoughts were interrupted by a faint rustle outside her tent. Her breath caught, and she set the pen down, her hand instinctively reaching for the small flashlight beside her cot. The sound came again, a soft, deliberate scrape, like footsteps treading lightly on the sandy ground. She froze, straining to listen. The camp was supposed to be secure, with Captain Maitland's men patrolling the perimeter. But the vastness of the desert made such assurances feel hollow. She recalled Louise's terror, her whispered tales of a face at the window, a shadow stalking her dreams. Was it happening again? Was the killer still among them, watching, waiting? Steeling herself, Amy flicked on the flashlight and crept to the tent's entrance. Seat parted, the flap just enough to peer into the darkness. The beam of light cut through the night, illuminating the jagged outlines of the dig site, the half-excavated ziggurat, the scattered tools, the low mounds of earth. Nothing moved. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant howl of a jackal. She was about to retreat when a shadow shifted near the equipment tent, a flicker of movement that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Her heart thudded. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. No answer came, but the rustle returned, now from the direction of the main excavation trench. Amy hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. Poirot had warned her to stay vigilant, to report anything unusual, but he was likely asleep in his tent, his mustache neatly combed, his mind at rest until dawn. She could wake him, but what would she say? That she heard a noise, that a shadow moved. He'd likely chide her for letting her imagination run wild. No, she decided. She would investigate herself, just a quick look to confirm it was nothing. Slipping on her boots, Amy stepped into the night, her flashlight sweeping the ground. The air was cooler now, the desert's heat giving way to a chill that prickled her skin. She moved toward the trench, her steps cautious, her ears straining for any sound. The dig site was a labyrinth of shadows, the ancient stones casting eerie shapes that seemed to writhe in the flickering beam. As she neared the trench, she noticed a faint glow emanating from within, a soft amber light that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Her pulse quickened. The trench was the site of the team's latest find, a hidden chamber, uncovered just hours ago during a nighttime excavation ordered by Dr. Leidner. The chamber had been a sensation, its walls lined with relics that matched the sketch found in Louise's jewelry box, a clay tablet, a bronze statuette, a series of carved seals. Poirot had been particularly intrigued by a stone slab etched with cryptic symbols, which he'd declared a code of the ancients. Could someone be tampering with it now? Amy crouched at the edge of the trench, peering down. The glow came from a single lantern, placed near the chamber's entrance, its flame casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Beside it lay a pile of tool shovels, brushes, a pickaxe hastily abandoned, as if the worker had fled. She swept her flashlight across the chamber, and her breath caught. There, on the far wall, was a fresh carving, a crude, jagged symbol that hadn't been there earlier that day. It resembled the ominous markings on the clay tablet, a spiral bisected by a dagger-like line. "Who's there?" she called again, her voice echoing in the confined space. The lantern flickered, and for a moment she thought she saw a figure, a tall, cloaked shape slip into the shadows at the chamber's edge. She scrambled to her feet, her flashlight shaking in her grip. "Show yourself." A low chuckle answered, chilling her to the bone. It was not a sound of mirth but of menace, low and deliberate, as if the speaker savored her fear. The lantern sputtered out, plunging the trench into darkness, save for her flashlight's narrow beam. Amy backed away, her mind racing. She needed Poirot. She needed to get back to the camp. As she turned to run, a hand clamped over her mouth, rough and calloused. She struggled, but the grip was iron, pulling her backward. Her flashlight fell, its beam spinning wildly before it struck the ground and went out. Panic surged, but Amy was no stranger to crisis. She'd faced worse in hospital wards. She drove her elbow back, connecting with her attacker's ribs. A grunt of pain followed, and the grip loosened just enough for her to break free. She stumbled toward the camp, her breath ragged, her eyes straining in the dark. Behind her, the footsteps resumed, heavy and purposeful. She reached the edge of the tents, her voice hoarse as she shouted, "Help! Someone! Help!" Lights flared as the camp stirred. Dr. Leidner emerged first, his face pale, his shirt half-buttoned. "Nurse Letherin, what's happened?" "Someone in the trench," Amy gasped. "They attacked me." Poirot appeared moments later, his dressing gown impeccable despite the hour, his eyes sharp as cut glass. "Mademoiselle, you are unharmed?" he asked, his voice calm but urgent. "Yes, but they're still out there," she said, pointing toward the trench. "There's a new carving, and a lantern. Someone was in the chamber." Poirot's gaze narrowed. "A carving, you say? Most interesting. Come, we must investigate at once." He turned to Dr. Leidner, roused the others. "Monsieur, no one leaves the camp." The team assembled quickly, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Richard Carey, his jaw tight, carried a rifle from the supply tent. Joseph Mercado clutched a trowel, his hands trembling. Marie MacArthur's eyes darted accusingly toward Amy, her lips pursed. David Emmett stood silently, his expression unreadable, while Bill Coleman muttered about cursed digs. Sheila Riley, wrapped in a shawl, looked more annoyed than afraid. Captain Maitland, summoned by a runner, arrived with 2 officers, their lanterns casting harsh light across the group. Poirot led the way to the trench, his small frame incongruously commanding. Amy followed, her nerves steadied by his presence. The lantern in the chamber was relit, revealing the new carving in stark relief. Poirot knelt beside it, his fingers tracing the spiral and dagger. "This is no ancient work," he murmured. "The edges are too fresh, the stone unweathered. Someone in this camp made this mark tonight." "But why?" Amy asked, her voice low. "To scare us, to cover something up." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Or to send a message. This symbol, it is not random. It matches the code on the slab we found today. A code, I believe, that points to a traitor among us." A murmur rippled through the group. Marie MacArthur's voice cut through, sharp and accusing. "A traitor? You're saying one of us is working against the dig? That's absurd. Nurse Letherin's the one poking around at night. Maybe she's the one stirring trouble." Amy bristled. "I was attacked, Mrs. MacArthur. I didn't imagine that." "Enough," Poirot said, his tone silencing the bickering. "Madame, your accusations are noted, but they do not explain the carving or the assault on Mademoiselle Letherin. We must examine the chamber further." The team descended into the trench, their lanterns casting a warm glow over the stone walls. The chamber was small, its air thick with the scent of earth and time. The relics tablet, statuette, seals were untouched, but Poirot's attention was fixed on the coded slab. He produced a notebook, sketching the symbols with precise strokes. "These are not mere decorations," he said. "They form a cipher, one I have seen before in my studies of ancient scripts. It speaks of a keeper of secrets, a guardian, who betrays their own. Betrayal." Dr. Leidner's voice was strained. "You think this is about Louise? That someone here betrayed her?" Poirot's gaze swept the group. Perhaps the betrayal is older, tied to the relics themselves. Someone in this camp knows more than they admit." Joseph MacArthur's trowel slipped from his hand, clattering against the stone. All eyes turned to him. I don't know anything," he stammered. "I'm just here for the work." Poirot smiled thinly. "Monsieur Mercado, your nerves betray you, but we shall see." As the team searched the chamber, Amy noticed David Emmett lingering near the entrance, his eyes fixed on the carving. She remembered his notebook, the sketches she'd glimpsed that mirrored the tablet's symbols. Could he be the traitor Poirot spoke of? She edged closer, her voice low. "David, what were you drawing in your notebook yesterday?" He started, his face tightening. "Just notes, nothing important. Notes that look like these symbols," she pressed. Before he could answer, Sheila Riley's voice rang out. "Look at this." She held up a small leather pouch, half buried in the dirt near the chamber's entrance. Inside was a single clay seal, its surface etched with the same spiral and dagger motif. Poirot took it, his expression grave. "This was not here this afternoon," he said. "Someone placed it tonight, perhaps during the attack on Mademoiselle Letherin." The group fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Captain Maitland cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, if there's a traitor, we need to lock down the camp. No one in or out until we find them." "Agreed," Poirot said, "but first, we return to the camp. I must think, and my little grey cells require quiet." Back at the camp, Amy couldn't shake the image of the carving, the feel of the attacker's hand on her mouth. She sat with Poirot in his tent, a single lamp casting long shadows. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "you said the code name's a living person from Louise's past. Who do you think it is?" Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Mademoiselle, the past is a shadow that follows us all. Louise Leidner feared a ghost, her husband, Frederick Bosner, presumed dead. But ghosts do not carve symbols or attack nurses in the night. The code, I believe, points to someone who knew her before, someone who carries her secrets and her sins." Amy's mind raced. Richard Carey, with his easy charm and close connection to Louise, Joseph McArthur, whose nerves seemed to crack under pressure, or David Emmett, with his cryptic sketches. "What do we do next?" she asked. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "We watch, mademoiselle. The traitor will move again, and when they do, Hercule Poirot will be ready." The night stretched on, the camp restless under the desert's watchful gaze. Amy lay awake, the echo of footsteps still ringing in her ears. The spiral and symbol burned into her mind. Somewhere in the darkness, a traitor walked among them, their secrets buried deeper than the relics of Mesopotamia. And Poirot, with his unerring logic, was closing in. Chapter 8. The ghost of Bosner's desert night pressed against the canvas of Amy Letherin's tent, its silence heavy with the weight of secrets. The air was cool now, a stark contrast to the day's blistering heat, but Amy felt no relief. Her heart thudded as she sat on her cot, her notebook open, pen trembling in her hand. The events of the past days, Louise Leidner's murder, the poisoned worker, the unmasking of Father Lavigny as the thief Raoul Menier had coiled the expedition camp into a knot of suspicion. And now, something new stirred in the darkness, a presence that felt both ancient and alive, as if the sands themselves whispered warnings. Amy's thoughts drifted to Hercule Poirot, the diminutive detective whose sharp grey eyes missed nothing. Earlier that evening, over a sparse dinner of flatbread and lentil stew, Poirot had been unusually quiet, his moustache twitching as he studied the team. The flickering lamplight had cast shadows across his face, making him look like a figure carved from the same ancient stone as the relics they unearthed. When Amy had caught his gaze, he'd given her a small, enigmatic nod, as if entrusting her with an unspoken task. She wasn't sure what he meant, but it had set her nerves on edge. The camp was restless. Beyond her tent, the faint clink of tools and the murmur of voices signaled a late-night inventory of the dig site's artifacts, ordered by Dr. Eric Leidner to restore order after Menier's deception. Amy had volunteered to stay behind, claiming fatigue, but in truth, she needed solitude to process the coded message Poirot had found in the hidden chamber, a scrap of papyrus, its cuneiform-like scratches naming a living person from Louise's past. The words "the shadow returns" had been scrawled in English below, in a hand that matched the threatening notes Louise had received. Amy's gut told her the answer was close, but the puzzle remained maddeningly incomplete. A soft rustle outside her tent snapped her back to the present. Her breath caught. The sound was deliberate, not the aimless stirring of wind. She set her notebook aside and crept to the tent flap, her fingers brushing the canvas. Peering through a narrow slit, she saw only darkness, the camp's lanterns, dimmed to conserve fuel. But then a silhouette, tall and lean, moved against the faint glow of the dig site's floodlights. It paused, head turning as if sensing her gaze, then vanished into the shadows. Amy's pulse raced. Louise's words echoed in her mind, a face at the window, watching me. Was this the same figure? She grabbed her flashlight, its beam weak, but steady, and slipped outside. The desert air stung her cheeks as she scanned the camp. The silhouette was gone, but a faint trail of footprints led toward the dig's northern quadrant, where the newly uncovered chamber lay. She hesitated. Poirot had warned her to stay cautious, to report anything unusual directly to him. But the camp was asleep, and Poirot's tent was on the far side. The footprints would vanish by morning, erased by the restless desert wind. Steeling herself, Amy followed the trail, her boots crunching softly on the sand. The dig site loomed ahead, its trenches and scaffolds like the bones of some ancient beast unearthed from the earth. As she neared the chamber's entrance, a low, stone-lined passage carved into the hillside, she heard a faint hum, like the one that had haunted the camp nights before. It wasn't mechanical, but almost human, a low chant that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Amy's flashlight beam caught the edge of the passage, illuminating a fresh scuff mark on the stone. Someone had been here, recently. Amy, a voice hissed from the darkness. She spun, her flashlight sweeping the shadows. David Emmett, the quiet dig worker, stepped into the beam, his face pale and his notebook clutched to his chest. His dark eyes darted nervously, and his usual calm demeanor was frayed. "David, what are you doing out here?" Amy's voice was sharper than she intended, her nerves taut. "I could ask you the same," he said, his tone low but not hostile. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check the chambermaid. Sure nothing else was disturbed after many a stunt." Amy studied him. David had always been reserved, his sketches of the dig's artifacts meticulous but unremarkable. Yet Poirot had noted his notebook, its pages filled with symbols eerily similar to those on the clay tablet linked to Louise's murder. Was he hiding something, or was he, like her, simply caught in the camp's web of suspicion? "Did you see anyone else out here?" she asked, lowering her flashlight slightly. David shook his head, but his eyes flicked toward the chamber's entrance. "No one, just felt something off." "You?" Amy debated telling him about the silhouette, but held back. "Just checking on things," she said vaguely. "Let's go back. It's not safe alone." He nodded, but as they turned, a sharp clatter echoed from the chamber. Amy froze, her flashlight snapping back to the entrance. David's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Wait," he whispered, "let me go first." Before she could protest, he crept toward the passage, his silhouette merging with the shadows. Amy followed, her heart pounding. The hum grew louder as they descended, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and dust. The chamber opened before them, its walls etched with carvings of winged deities and coiled serpents. In the center, a stone plinth held a single artifact, a small, obsidian statuette of a jackal-headed figure, its eyes glinting in the flashlight's beam. David stopped short, his breath hitching. "That wasn't here yesterday," he said, his voice barely audible. Amy's gaze darted around the chamber. The shadows seemed to shift, as if the walls themselves were watching. Then, from the far corner, a figure stepped forward, tall, lean, and cloaked in a dark robe. The silhouette from outside. Amy's flashlight caught a glint of steel in the figure's hand, a curved dagger, its blade etched with symbols. "Stay where you are," the figure said, their voice low and accented, impossible to place. "The relic is mine." Amy's mouth went dry. She glanced at David, whose face was a mask of shock, or was it recognition? Before she could speak, the figure lunged, the dagger flashing. David shoved Amy aside, and the blade grazed his arm, drawing a thin line of blood. Amy stumbled, her flashlight clattering to the floor, plunging the chamber into near darkness. "Run!" David shouted, grappling with the figure. Amy scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. She couldn't leave him, but she needed help. Sprinting up the passage, she burst into the night, her shouts shattering the camp's silence. "Poirot! Dr. Leidner! Someone!" Lights flickered on, and figures emerged from tents. Dr. Leidner, disheveled but alert. Sheila Riley, her face pale, and Joseph Mercado, his hands trembling as he clutched a lantern. Poirot appeared last, his silk dressing gown absurdly out of place in the desert chaos. "Mademoiselle Letherin, what is it?" Poirot's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp as flint. "In the chamber, David's fighting someone." A dagger, a relic. Amy's words tumbled out, breathless. Poirot's mustache twitched. Lead the way. Quickly. They descended into the chamber, lanterns casting wild shadows. David lay slumped against the plinth, clutching his arm, the statuette gone. The attacker had vanished, leaving only a torn scrap of robe caught on a jagged stone. Poirot knelt beside David, examining the wound. Superficial, Poirot said. His tone clipped. Monsieur Emmett, you are fortunate. Now, tell me, did you recognize the assailant? David shook his head, wincing. Too dark. They were fast. They wanted that. Poirot's gaze lingered on David, then shifted to the torn fabric. He picked it up with a handkerchief, his fingers delicate as if handling a rare artifact. Curious, he murmured, this cloth is not local. Silk, finely woven, perhaps, from Damascus. Dr. Leidner stepped forward, his face ashen. This is madness. First Louise, then the worker, now this. We must stop the dig. No, Poirot said sharply. The dig continues, for it is here that the truth lies buried. Mademoiselle Letheran, you saw this figure earlier. Amy nodded, recounting the silhouette and the footprints. Poirot listened, his eyes narrowing. And you, Monsieur Emmott, were conveniently present. Tell me, what were you sketching? In your notebook tonight? David flushed. Dust notes. Artifact details. Nothing important. Everything is important, Poirot said softly. We shall see your notebook later. As the team returned to the camp, Poirot drew Amy aside. Mademoiselle, you have courage, but you must not act alone. The shadow returns, as the message said. I believe this shadow is no ghost, but a man, Frederick Bosner, Louise's first husband, who I suspect is not dead. Amy's breath caught. Bosner, but how? The train crash presumed dead, Poirot corrected. A man like Bosner, a spy, knows how to vanish. And now, I believe he walks among us, disguised as one we trust. The next morning, the camp buzzed with unease. Captain Maitland arrived, his police jeep kicking up dust. Poirot briefed him on the attack, omitting his Bosner theory. Amy watched the team closely. Mercatho's sharp glances, Bill Coleman's forced nonchalance, Sheila's nervous pacing. Richard Carey, the charming archaeologist, was absent, claiming a headache. Amy's stomach twisted. Carey's easy, smile and close bond with Louise had always seemed too perfect. Poirot gathered the team in the mess tent, his demeanor grave. Mies Amos, we face a cunning adversary. The attack last night was no random theft. The statuette, I believe, is a keynote to wealth, but to vengeance. Louise Leidner's death was personal, and the killer is among us. Murmurs rippled through the group. Marie Mercatho's voice cut through. This is absurd. You're saying, one of us is a murderer. Two murderers, Poirot said calmly. Louise's killer, and the one who poisoned the worker. Their motives may differ, but their paths converge on the relic. Amy's mind raced. Poirot's words about Bosner echoed. She recalled a faded photograph in Louise's room, a young man with sharp cheekbones, his eyes intense. She'd seen those eyes before, hadn't she? On Carey, perhaps. Or was it her imagination? Poirot continued, holding up the torn silk. This belongs to our shadow. I propose a test. Tonight, we shall lay a trap, using the chamber as bait. The statuette is gone, but the killer does not know we have another relic decoy. Dr. Leidner frowned. You're risking more lives, Poirot. Nan, Poirot said, I risk only the truth, and I shall be there to meet it. As the team dispersed, Amy caught Sheila Riley lingering, her face pale. Amy, Sheila whispered, I saw something last night. He was out near the chamber before the attack. He said he was checking equipment, but he looked wrong. Scared, Amy's pulse quickened. Did you tell Poirot? Sheila shook her head. I'm not sure. Richard's been good to me. But what if he's not who he says? Amy squeezed her hand. Stay close to the camp tonight. I'll tell Poirot. The day dragged, the sun relentless. Amy found Poirot in his tent, studying David's notebook. The pages were filled with sketches, artifacts, yes, but also symbols that matched the ominous carvings on the clay tablet. Poirot's finger traced one, a spiral with a jagged line. This, he said, is no mere decoration. It is a signature, a mark of intent. Bosner used such symbols in his espionage work, I am told. A code within a code. Amy hesitated, then shared Sheila's observation about Carey. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Bonner, the pieces align. Tonight, we shall see. As dusk fell, Poirot outlined his plan. The team would gather in the chamber, ostensibly to catalogue artifacts. A fake relic, a clay replica, crafted by Bill Coleman, would be placed on the plinth. Poirot, Amy, and Captain Maitland would hide nearby, watching. The trap was simple: lure the killer to reveal themselves. The chamber was stifling, the air thick with tension. The team stood around the plinth, their faces lit by lanterns. Dr. Leidner clutched his clipboard, his knuckles white. Marie's eyes darted nervously. David, his arm bandaged, stood apart, his expression unreadable. Carey was there, his charm subdued, his gaze fixed on the decoy relic. Poirot's voice broke the silence. "Mies Amos, this relic holds the key to Louise's death. One of you knows its secret." A sudden clatter echoed from the passage. All heads turned as a figure burst in. Richard Carey, his face contorted with rage, a pistol in his hand. "Enough, games, Poirot," he shouted. "The relic is mine." Amy gasped. Kara's eyes were those from the photograph Bosner's eyes. Poirot stepped forward, unflinching. "Monsieur Bosner, your disguise is admirable, but your patience is not. You killed Louise for her betrayal. And now you seek the relic to complete your revenge." Kara's laugh was bitter. "You're clever, Poirot, but too late. Louise deserved it. She left me for dead, took everything. This relic, it's my redemption." Before he could move, another sound, a sharp crack, rang out. Carey staggered, clutching his shoulder, the pistol falling. From the shadows, Marie Mercator emerged, a small revolver in her trembling hand. "You fool," she hissed. "You thought I'd let you take it all." Chaos erupted. Maitland tackled Marie, disarming her. David and Dr. Leidner restrained Carey, who slumped, blood seeping through his shirt. Poirot raised a hand, restoring order. "To killers," he said, his voice steady. "Bosner, you murdered Louise, driven by a past she could not escape. Madame Mercado, you poisoned the worker, hoping to claim the relics for yourself. The statuette was a lure, but your greed betrayed you both." Amy's heart pounded as Maitland handcuffed the pair. The camp was safe, but the cost was heavy. As the team filed out, Poirot turned to Amy, his eyes soft. "Mademoiselle, you have seen the desert's truth. Tomorrow, we unmask the final secrets." Chapter 9. The desert's truth. The sun hung low over the Hassanieh dig, casting long shadows that clawed at the dunes like the fingers of some ancient, restless spirit. The air was thick with the weight of secrets, each grain of sand seeming to whisper a fragment of the truth that had eluded the excavation team for weeks. Nurse Amy Leatheran stood at the edge of the camp, her arms crossed tightly against the evening chill, her eyes scanning the horizon as if it might yield answers. The murders of Louise Leidner and the dig worker, coupled with the near-fatal poisoning of Dr. Eric Leidner, had frayed the nerves of everyone in the camp. The once vibrant camaraderie of the archaeologists had crumbled into suspicion, and now, with Hercule Poirot poised to unmask the culprits, the tension was palpable. Inside the main tent, the team gathered under the flickering light of oil lamps. The canvas walls rippled faintly in the desert breeze, lending an eerie rhythm to the scene, as though the tent itself were breathing. Poirot stood at the center, his small, fastidious figure commanding the space with an authority that belied his stature. His mustache twitched as he surveyed the assembly. Dr. Leidner, pale but resolute. Richard Carey, whose charm now seemed a brittle mask. Marie Mercado, her lips pursed in defiance. Joseph Mercado, fidgeting with a pen. Bill Coleman, his usual bravado subdued. Sheila Riley, her eyes darting nervously. David Emmett, silent and watchful. And Raoul Manier, the false father Livigny, his hands bound, his thief's bravado replaced by sullen resignation. Amy took her place near the back, her notebook clutched tightly, a habit born of her nursing days but now a lifeline to record Poirot's unraveling of the mystery. She felt the weight of the past weeks, the cryptic notes, the eerie hum in the night, the relic's curse, and the chilling realization that Frederick Bosner, Louise's long-presumed dead husband, might be among them. Poirot's hypothesis from the previous night, that Bosner lived and hid in plain sight, had sent a shiver through the camp. Now, as the detective's eyes gleamed with purpose, Amy braced herself for the truth. Madame et Poirot began, his voice crisp yet resonant, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Tonight, we stand at the crossroads of truth and deception. 2 murders have stained this desert, and a 3rd attempt nearly claimed another life. The sands have whispered their secrets, and Hercule Poirot has listened." A ripple of unease passed through the group. Marie McCathor's fingers tightened around her shawl, and Richard Carey's jaw clenched, though his eyes remained fixed on Poirot with a studied calm. "Let us begin," Poirot continued, "with the death of Madame Louise Leidner, a woman of beauty, of charm, but also of secrets. Her fear of a shadowy figure, her tales of a face at her window, these were not the fancies of a nervous mind, as some believed. No, they were the echoes of a past she could not escape, a past tied to Frederick Bosner, her first husband, a German spy thought to have perished in a train crash." Dr. Leidner shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped tightly. "But Bosner is dead," he said, his voice strained. "Louise told me so herself. The authorities confirmed it." Poirot raised a finger, his eyes narrowing. "Nan, monsieur, the authorities confirmed a body, charred beyond recognition. Convenient nest seep. A man like Bosner, skilled in deception, could orchestrate such a ruse, and orchestrate it he did, for he is here, among us, wearing a mask of charm and civility." A gasp escaped Sheila Riley, her hand flying to her mouth. Joseph Mercado dropped his pen, the clatter loud in the taut silence. Amy's heart raced as she scanned the faces, searching for a telltale sign, a flicker of guilt, a shadow of fear. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden floorboards laid in the tent. "Let us reconstruct the crime. Madame Leidner was found in her locked room, a single blood stain on the rug, the window barred, the door undisturbed. Yet someone entered and struck her down. How? The method was ingenious, a testament to a cunning mind. A rope, weighted with a stone, was lowered from the roof through a small ventilation shaft, too narrow for a man, but sufficient for a weapon. The killer stood above, unseen, and delivered the fatal blow." Bill Coleman leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "But that's impossible. The roof's too high, and we'd have heard something." Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "Impossible. No, monsieur, the desert is vast, and the night is silent. The killer chose a moment when the camp was distracted, perhaps by the hum, that eerie sound we have all heard. A sound, I propose, created deliberately to mask the act." Amy's mind flashed to the nights she'd lain awake, the strange hum vibrating through the camp. She'd thought it the wind, or perhaps machinery, but Poirot's words cast it in a new, sinister light. "But who?" Marie Mercado demanded, her voice sharp. "You can't just accuse us without proof." Poirot turned to her, his gaze piercing. "Patience, madame. The proof is in the patterns, in the little grey cells that piece together the mosaic of motive and opportunity. Let us consider the relic, the so-called cursed artifact that Madame Leidner sketched in her hidden compartment. A relic tied, two legends of death, coveted by many. Was it the motive? Or was it a distraction, a veil to obscure the personal vendetta that drove the killer?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air. Amy's grip tightened on her notebook, her pen poised. She remembered the sketch, the cryptic symbols that mirrored the clay tablet Poirot had examined in Chapter 2. The relic had seemed a key, but now Poirot suggested it was a red herring. "Let us turn to the second murder," Poirot continued, "the poisoning of the dig worker, found near the site with a rare desert herb in his system. A herb, I note, that requires knowledge of botany, knowledge possessed by few in this camp. And then the attempt on Dr. Leidner's life, a tampered water supply laced with the same poison. Two killers perhaps, with different motives, yet working in the chaos of this dig." The tent seemed to shrink, the air growing heavier. David Emmett, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice steady but low. "You're saying there's more than one person behind this?" Poirot nodded. "Precisely. The first murder was a crime of passion, of vengeance. The second, a crime of opportunism, of greed. Let us unmask the first killer, the one who struck Madame La—" He turned abruptly, his eyes locking onto Richard Carey. The man stiffened, his charm slipping like a cracked veneer. "Monsieur Carey," Poirot said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "or should I say, Frederick Bosner." A collective gasp rose from the group. Amy's breath caught, her eyes darting to Carey, whose face drained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but Poirot pressed on, relentless. "You thought your disguise impeccable, Nan. The charm, the easy smile, the role of the devoted archaeologist. But the little grey cells, they see what others miss. The photograph of Bosner, found among Madame Leidner's effects, bore a striking resemblance to you once one, accounts for the years, and a clever alteration of appearance. Your motive? Vengeance. Louise betrayed you, monsieur, when she believed you dead and married another. You survived the crash, bided your time, and infiltrated this dig to exact your revenge. Carey's hands clenched into fists, his voice hoarse. This is absurd. I'm Richard Carey, not some ghost from the past. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Vraiment, then explained the letter, hidden in Madame Leidner's room, addressed to F.B., a letter that spoke of love and betrayal, written in her hand. Explain the silhouette she feared, a man whose build matches yours, and explain the rope, found discarded near the dig, with fibers matching your jacket. Carey's composure shattered. He rose, his voice trembling with rage. Yes, I killed her, he spat, the words erupting like a long-buried volcano. She deserved it. She abandoned me, left me for dead while she played the grieving widow. I waited years, planned every detail. I came here to make her pay. The tent erupted in chaos. Sheila screamed, Joseph Mercado recoiled, and Dr. Leidner buried his face in his hands. Amy scribbled furiously, her heart pounding as Carey's confession hung in the air. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Mercy, Monsieur Carey, your confession confirms what the little grey cells deduced. But, he added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, you did not act alone in this tragedy. There is another, one who saw opportunity in the chaos. You created. He turned slowly, his gaze settling on Marie Mercado. The woman froze, her eyes wide with panic. Madame Mercado, Poirot said, your jealousy of Madame Leidner was no secret. Her beauty, her hold over the men hear it, gnawed at you. But it was not just jealousy, Nan, it was greed. The relics, the promise of wealth, drove you to murder the dig worker, hoping to pin it on Carey's spree and secure the artifacts for yourself. Marie laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. You're mad. I had nothing to do with it. Poirot's smile was cold. Vraiment, then why did we find traces of the same rare herb in your medical kit? Madame, a kit you, as the camp's unofficial nurse, had access to. Why did your husband, Monsieur Joseph, grow pale when I mentioned the herb's properties? He suspected, did he not, but could not bring himself to betray you. Joseph's head snapped up, his eyes filled with guilt. Marie, tell me it's not true, he whispered. Marie's defiance crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she sank into her chair. I didn't mean to kill anyone, she sobbed. The worker, he caught me hiding the relics. I panicked, gave him the herb to make him sick, not to kill him. And the water, I thought it would just scare Leidner, make him leave so we could take the artifacts. Poirot nodded, his expression one of grim satisfaction. The truth, it always emerges, like a relic from the sands. Monsieur Carey, your vengeance cost a life. Madame Mercado, your greed cost another. Both of you shall face justice. Captain Maitland, who had been standing quietly at the tent's entrance, stepped forward with two officers. Carey and Marie were led away, the former silent, the latter sobbing. The camp fell into a stunned silence, the weight of the revelations settling like dust. Amy closed her notebook, her hands trembling. She approached Poirot as the others dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and sorrow. Monsieur, she said softly, how did you know? About Carey, about Marie. Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his face remained solemn. Mademoiselle Amy, the little grey cells, they observed the human heart. Carey's charm was too perfect, too practiced. Marie's hostility, it masked a deeper motive. The Clouseau rope, the herb, the letters, they were but threads in the tapestry of truth. Amy nodded, her mind still reeling. And the relics, were they ever cursed? Poirot chuckled softly. None, mademoiselle. The only curse is the greed and vengeance that live in the hearts of men and women. The relics are but clay, their value in what we project upon them. As the camp began to settle, Amy walked out into the night, the stars above bright and unyielding. The desert stretched before her, vast and eternal, its secrets now laid bare. She thought of Louise, of the worker, of the lives lost to passion and greed. The truth had been uncovered, the culprits caught, but a quiet melancholy lingered. The desert, she realized, would keep its silence, burying its stories beneath the sands until the next tale of human folly came to light. Chapter 10. Dust settles, truth endures. The desert sun hung low, casting a golden veil over the Hassanieh dig site, its rays glinting off the scattered shards of pottery that littered the sand like forgotten memories. Nurse Amy Letherin stood at the edge of the camp, her suitcase packed, her heart a tangle of relief and melancholy. The murders that had shaken the expedition, Louise Leidner's death in her locked room, the poisoned worker, the tampered water supply had been resolved, yet the air still carried a weight, as if the dunes themselves whispered secrets not fully unearthed. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit somehow untouched by the desert's dust, stood beside her, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon, as if it might yield one final clue. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice crisp yet warm. "The desert, it is like the human heart. No, it hides its truths beneath layers of sand, but with patience, all is revealed." Amy nodded, her thoughts drifting to the chaotic days that had culminated in yesterday's dramatic confrontation. Richard Carey, unmasked as Frederick Bosner, Louise's vengeful first husband, had confessed to her murder with a chilling calm. His charm a facade for years of festering betrayal. Marie Mercado, driven by jealousy and greed, had admitted to the second killing, her venomous gaze betraying no remorse. Both were now in Captain Maitland's custody, bound for Baghdad's courts. Raoul Manure, the false father Lavigny, had been apprehended in Beirut, his stolen artifacts recovered. The camp, once a crucible of suspicion, was quiet now, its members preparing to scatter. Yet Amy felt an itch, a lingering question that tugged at her like a loose thread. She turned to Poirot. "Mr. Poirot, you've tied it all up neat." "Marie Meunier, but something bothers me." Louise's fear, those notes, the Relic's Riddle. Was it all just personal grudges? Or was there something more to this dig, something we missed? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Amy had come to recognize as his delight in a perceptive question. "Mademoiselle Letherin, your instincts are formidable. Come, let us walk. There is time before your departure for one final denouement." They strolled toward the excavation site, where the team's tents fluttered in the evening breeze. The dig's central trench, where the hidden chamber had been uncovered, lay exposed, its relics now catalogued and crated for the Baghdad Museum. Amy's boots crunched on the sand, the sound grounding her as Poirot began to speak. "The final pieces consider, mademoiselle, the nature of this case," Poirot said, his hands clasped behind his back. "We have unmasked 2 murderers and a thief. Yet the heart of the mystery, the Relic's Riddle, demands a final accounting. Let us reconstruct, step by step, how the threads wove together." Amy listened intently, her nurse's practicality anchoring her against the surreal weight of Poirot's words. He began with Louise Leidner, the catalyst of the tragedy. Madame Leidner was a woman of contradictions, beautiful, manipulative, haunted. Her fear of a shadowy figure was no delusion. It was Frederick Bosner, alive and disguised as Richard Carey. He infiltrated the dig to exact revenge for her betrayal during the war, when she exposed him as a spy. His method, the locked room murder, was ingenious, using a rope and pulley system through the skylight, unseen by all. Amy shivered, recalling the single bloodstain on Louise's rug. But the second murder, the poisoned worker, how did Marie fit in? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Marie Mercado was a woman consumed by envy. She despised Louise's hold over the men, particularly her husband, Joseph. When Carey's murder stirred chaos, Marie saw opportunity. The worker, Ollie, had stumbled upon her tampering with relics to sell on the black market. She poisoned him with a rare desert herb, believing it would be blamed on the curse of the relic. Her mistake was underestimating the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. Amy nodded, but her brow furrowed. And the relic itself, that sketch in Louise's jewelry box, the coded message in the chamber, were they just distractions? Poirot stopped, gazing at the trench where the chamber had been found. "Not distractions, mademoiselle, but the heart of the matter." The relic, a Mesopotamian tablet inscribed with a prophecy, was no mere artifact. It was a map, encoded with directions to a hidden cache of gold, buried by a priest-king millennia ago. Louise, unknowingly, held the key in her sketch. Meunier, the false priest, sought it for profit. Carey used it to fuel his vendetta, planting notes to torment Louise. Marie, greedy for wealth, killed to protect her own scheme. Amy's eyes widened. "A gold cache, but we never found it." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Patience, mademoiselle. Let us visit the chamber one last time." The hidden truth. They descended into the trench, where the chamber's stone walls stood silent, their carvings softened by the fading light. David Emmett, the quiet dig worker, was there, cataloguing the last of the relics. He looked up, his calm, demeanor a stark contrast to the camp's earlier turmoil. "Mr. Poirot, Amy didn't expect to see you here. Everything's packed for Baghdad." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur Emmett, your diligence is admirable. But tell me, have you noticed anything unusual among the relics today?" David hesitated, his hand resting on a crate. "Well, there was one tablet smaller than the others, with odd markings. I set it aside for Dr. Leidner to review." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Show me." David led them to a small table where a clay tablet, no larger than a book, lay wrapped in cloth. Poirot unwrapped it, revealing intricate cuneiform symbols that matched Louise's sketch. He traced a finger along the grooves, murmuring, "Oui, c'est car," the final piece. Amy leaned closer. "Is this the map?" Poirot nodded. "This tablet, overlooked in the chaos, contains the prophecy's coordinates. Last night, while the camp slept, I cross-referenced its symbols with the chamber's coded message. They point to a location beneath this very chamber, a secondary vault." David's jaw dropped. "A vault? Here?" Poirot gestured to a corner of the chamber where the floor seemed uneven. "Monsieur Emmett, if you would assist with a shovel." David carefully pried at the stone floor. After a few tense minutes, a slab shifted, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Poirot produced a torch from his satchel, its beam illuminating a small sealed chamber. Inside, nestled among ancient pottery, were gold ingots, their surfaces etched with the same prophetic symbols. Amy gasped. "It's real." The gold Poirot's expression was grave. "This is why Louise died, why Ollie was poisoned. Greed and vengeance entwined, as they so often do. But we shall ensure this treasure reaches the proper authorities, not the hands of thieves." David shook his head, awestruck. "I had no idea. I thought the relics were just history." "History, mon ami, is never just history," Poirot said. "It is a mirror to the human soul." Farewells and reflections by dawn. The gold was secured, and Captain Maitland's men arrived transported to Baghdad. The camp buzzed with the news, though Dr. Leidner, still shaken by his near-death experience, chose to remain silent, his grief for Louise tempered by relief. Amy stood with Poirot near the camp's entrance, watching the sunrise paint the dunes, in hues of amber and rose. "You knew about the gold all along, didn't you?" Amy asked. Poirot chuckled softly. "Suspected, mademoiselle, the little grey cells. They do not rest. But I needed certainty, and the tablet provided it." Amy glanced at David, who was speaking with Sheila Riley near a jeep. Their easy laughter hinted at a budding romance, a bright spot amid the tragedy. "They'll be all right, won't they?" Poirot followed her gaze. "Monsieur Emmett and Mademoiselle Riley have found something rare, a trust untainted by the desert's shadows. They will marry, I think, and carry this story as a lesson." Amy smiled, then turned serious. "And you, Mr. Poirot, where to next?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes twinkling. "To Cairo, mademoiselle. There is a matter of a stolen scarab and a most curious widow. But for now, I bid you au revoir. You have been a fine companion, with a heart as sharp as your eyes." Amy blushed, shaking his hand. "Take care, Mr. Poirot, and thank you for everything." As she boarded the truck to Baghdad, Amy looked back at the dig site, its tents fading into the haze. The desert had tested her, unearthing not just relics, but truths about courage, betrayal, and the fragile bonds that tie people together. She opened her notebook, where she jotted her observations, and began to write. "The desert hides its secrets, but it also reveals them, if you know where to look. Hercule Poirot taught me that, and I'll carry it with me wherever I go." The truck rumbled on, and Amy felt a quiet peace settle over her. The mystery was solved, the truth endured, and the sands of Hassanieh would keep their silence at least until the next story stirred them. Chapter 11. The Sands Speak Again. The desert stretched endlessly before Amy Letheran as the truck rumbled away from the Hassanieh dig site, its wheels kicking up clouds of sand that shimmered in the dawn light. The mysteries of Louise Leidner's murder, the poisoned worker, and the hidden gold cache were resolved, yet Amy's heart thrummed with a restless curiosity. Hercule Poirot's parting words echoed in her mind. "The desert, mademoiselle, is never silent. It speaks to those who listen." She had thought the case closed, the camp's secrets buried with the culprits Frederick Bosner, unmasked as Richard Carey, and Marie Mercado, both now in custody. But as the truck jolted over a dune, a glint in the distance caught her eye. Metallic flash, unnatural against the barren landscape. Amy tapped the driver, a grizzled local named Hassan. "Stop for a moment, please. What's that over there?" Hassan squinted, his weathered face creasing. "Nothing but sand and ghosts. Cider. The desert plays tricks." But Amy's nurse's instincts, honed by days of suspicion and observation, urged her to investigate. She stepped out, the heat pressing against her like a living thing. The glint came from a small, rusted tin half buried near a rocky outcrop. She knelt, brushing away the sand to reveal a locked box, its surface etched with cuneiform symbols eerily similar to those on the prophetic tablet Poirot had deciphered. Her pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. Back in the truck, Amy clutched the box, her mind racing. The Hassanieh case was supposed to be over, yet this discovery felt like a loose thread in Poirot's meticulous tapestry. She resolved to return to Baghdad and contact him before leaving for England. The desert, it seemed, had one more story to tell, a summons to Baghdad. In Baghdad, Amy found Poirot at the Tigris Palace Hotel, sipping coffee in a shaded courtyard, his moustache impeccably groomed despite the sweltering heat. He raised an eyebrow as she approached, the tin box under her arm. "Mademoiselle Leverin," he said, his voice a blend of surprise and delight. "I had thought you on your way to England, yet here you are, with a most intriguing parcel." "Quest CEQ," Amy set the box on the table. "I found this near the dig site, just as I was leaving. The symbols there, like the ones on the tablet. I couldn't leave without showing you." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined the box, tracing the carvings with a gloved finger. "Mon Dieu, the desert does not disappoint. These symbols are not merely decorative, they are a cipher, a continuation of the prophecy we uncovered. But why was this hidden away from the chamber?" He produced a small tool from his pocket, deftly picking the lock. Inside was a parchment, brittle with age, and a bronze medallion engraved with a winged bull, a symbol Amy recognized from the dig's relics. Poirot unrolled the parchment, revealing a map marked with coordinates and a single word in cuneiform. "Ninkarekt, the Mesopotamian goddess of healing." "This," Poirot murmured, "is no ordinary find. Ninkarekt's name suggests a sacred site, perhaps a temple lost to time. The map points to a location north of Hassanieh, near the Euphrates. We must investigate. Mademoiselle, will you join me?" Amy hesitated, her ticket to England in her satchel, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. "I'm in, Mr. Poirot. Let's see what the sands are hiding." The journey north by noon, Poirot and Amy were in a jeep driven by Hassan, heading toward the coordinates. The Euphrates glinted in the distance, a ribbon of life amid the arid waste. Poirot had enlisted Dr. Relic Leidner, who, despite his grief over Louise, agreed to join them, eager to uncover the dig's final secrets. David Emmett and Sheila Riley, now openly affectionate, insisted on coming along, their curiosity outweighing their plans to depart. As they drove, Poirot shared his hypothesis. "The gold cache we found was significant, but this map suggests a greater treasure, a temple of Ninkarok, possibly containing relics of healing rituals. Such a site would be priceless and dangerous, for it would attract those who seek power over history." Dr. Leidner, his face lined with exhaustion, nodded. Louise was obsessed with the idea of a lost temple. She thought the relic's curse was tied to it. "I dismissed it as her imagination. But now," Sheila, sitting beside David, frowned. "Could someone else from the camp have known about this? Menhir, maybe?" Poirot shook his head. "Menhir was a thief, not a visionary. His crimes were petty. This feels larger. We must be vigilant." The jeep slowed as they reached a cluster of ruins, half swallowed by dunes. The map's coordinates led to a sunken basin, where eroded stone pillars jutted like broken teeth. Amy's heart raced as she spotted a carved archway, its surface etched with the winged bull symbol. The air felt heavy, as if the ruins themselves were watching. The temple of Ninkarakthi descended into the basin, the sand shifting underfoot. Poirot examined the archway, noting a hidden mechanism, a stone slab that slid aside when pressed. Beyond it lay a tunnel, its walls lined with faded reliefs of priestesses and healing rituals. Amy's torchbeam danced across the carvings, revealing a scene of Ninkarak bestowing a vial of liquid on a kneeling figure. "This is it," Dr. Leidner whispered. "A temple dedicated to healing." Louise would have been overjoyed. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber, its ceiling domed with star-shaped mosaics. At its center stood a stone altar, atop which rested a crystal vial, its contents shimmering faintly. Around it were scattered offerings beads, amulets, and a clay tablet inscribed with a prayer to Nick. Poirot approached, his expression grave. "This vial," he said, "may contain the elixir of Ninkarok, a legendary substance said to heal any ailment, but such power invites treachery." As if on cue, a shadow moved at the chamber's edge. Amy spun, her torch catching a figure cloaked in dark robes. The stranger raised a hand, holding a pistol. "Step away from the altar," a woman's voice commanded, sharp and accented. Poirot remained calm. "Madame, reveal yourself. There is no need for violence." The figure lowered her hood, revealing a face Amy didn't recognize: olive skin, fierce eyes, and a scar across one cheek. "I am Zara al-Nayar," she said, "the temple's guardian. You've meddled in things you don't understand." Dr. Leidner stepped forward, his voice trembling. "We're archaeologists, not looters. This belongs to history." Zara's laugh was bitter. "History? The world plunders our past for profit. I've protected this temple for years, since my father died defending it. The elixir is sacred, it must not leave these walls." Amy's mind raced, recalling Louise's notes about a guardian she'd dismissed as myth. "You sent the notes to Louise, didn't you, to scare her away?" Zara's eyes narrowed. She was getting too close. "I warned her, but she wouldn't listen. I didn't kill her, her own people did that. But I've watched this dig, ensuring no one reached this place." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, Madame, you are here, with a weapon. Why not let us take the vial to a museum, where it can be studied for the good of all?" Zara shook her head. "You think I trust your museums? They'll sell it to the highest bidder. Step back, or I shoot." David, ever practical, whispered to Amy, "She's alone. We can reason with her." But before they could act, Sheila gasped, pointing to the tunnel. Footsteps echoed, and 3 men emerged, mercenaries, by their rough attire and rifles. Their leader, a burly man with a shaved head, grinned. "Zara, you led us right to it. Hand over the vial, and we might let you live." A dance of motives. The chamber became a powder keg. Zara's pistol wavered between the group and the mercenaries. Poirot, undaunted, raised his hands. "Gentlemen, Madame, let us discuss this like civilized people. The elixir is valuable. But bloodshed will not preserve it." The mercenary leader, who introduced himself as Karim, scoffed. "Save your talk, little man. We've tracked this temple for months, thanks to Mynheer's loose lips in Beirut. The vials, worth millions." Amy's heart sank. Mynheer, the false priest, had betrayed more than artifacts. She glanced at Poirot, whose calm demeanor belied the danger. "Monsieur Karim," Poirot said, "you seek wealth, but consider. The elixir's power is untested. It may be poison, not salvation. Let us analyze it first." Karim hesitated, his greed warring with caution. Zara seized the moment, grabbing the vial and bolting toward a side passage. The mercenaries fired, bullets ricocheting off the stone. Amy dove behind the altar, pulling Sheila with her. David and Dr. Leidner scrambled for cover, while Poirot, astonishingly, stood his ground. "Arrates," Poirot shouted, his voice commanding. "If you destroy the vial, you destroy your prize." Karim snarled but lowered his rifle. "Find her," he ordered his men. They vanished into the passage, leaving Karim to guard the group. Amy whispered to Poirot, "What now?" Poirot's eyes flicked to the altar. "The tablet here, it describes a ritual. If the elixir is removed without the proper prayer, the chamber seals itself. Zara knows this. She is luring them into a trap." Sure enough, a distant rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling as the passage collapsed, trapping the mercenaries. Zara reappeared, breathless, the vial still in her hand. "You fools," she spat at Karim. "The temple protects itself." Karim lunged, but David tackled him, pinning him to the ground. Amy grabbed a fallen rifle, her hand steady despite her fear. "Enough," she shouted. "Zara, we don't want to steal your heritage. Let's find a way to protect it together." The Sans resolution. Zara's resolve wavered, her eyes searching Amy's face. Poirot stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Madame al-Nayar, you are a guardian, not a killer. Let us take the elixir to a neutral authority, perhaps the University of Baghdad. They will study it, preserve it, and honor your people's legacy." After a tense moment, Zara nodded. "Swear it will stay in Iraq." Poirot bowed. "On my honor." They secured Karim, who cursed his lost fortune, and retrieved the trapped mercenaries. shaken but alive. The elixir was handed to Dr. Leidner, who promised to deliver it to the university, with Zara's oversight. As they emerged from the temple, the sun was setting, painting the ruins in fiery hues. Amy stood with Poirot, watching Zara disappear into the dunes, her mission complete. "She's a ghost of the desert," Amy said, "like the sands themselves." Poirot smiled, "And like the sands, she endures. You, mademoiselle, have a gift for seeing the truth. Perhaps you should consider a career in detection." Amy laughed, the tension easing. "I'll stick to nursing, Mr. Poirot, but I'll never forget this." As they drove back to Baghdad, David and Sheila holding hands in the back, Amy opened her notebook, adding a final entry. "The desert speaks in riddles, but its truths are worth hearing. With Poirot's help, I've learned to listen and to trust, that even the darkest mysteries can find light." The jeep vanished into the twilight, leaving the sands to whisper their secrets to the stars.